Now, what's been happening, by the way, is that a bunch of Korean ADCs are playing Cho'Gath ADC in Korean solo queue.
Oh, Lord. My Lord. My Lord. This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight here on Last Free Nation. Now, of course, on the Last Free Nation channel, if you're watching live, obviously, if you want to support our channel, you could give us a cheeky Twitch Prime, or you could even sub directly to the channel and spend your own hard-earned cash, what apparently most people in esports won't do, because the average fan from some article I read recently spends $5 a year. So, spoiler, that sub will cost, what, $6 a month or something? So, you know, you could basically be in the 0.001% of fans just by supporting the channel. If you watch it on YouTube, just click on the channel, and if you enjoy other shows from people like Monty or myself, they're on the channel. Last week's Best Damn League show wraps up LEC. We have Power Spike, obviously, with Dorm and Dagon. We have the Monty and Wolf show, which at this point in time is just like the weekly fucking meeting of the T1 Appreciation Society or whatever. But it's okay. That is in some ways what LCK has become. That's all good. We enjoy it. We like the flights of fancy. Like, I did like that one, by the way, before we get into it, where Wolf actually believes that like story, which is like some pure campfire thing, that like Faker at all times is like 2 minutes in the future, like a pre-cog or something. Like, here's the thing, Wolf. Yeah, once or twice that probably happened. He doesn't really know on every death, like, they're coming for me. He's not like Jesus, like, they don't know what they do, my children, now attack the bot tower while they get like I love that, because what I love about that is that shows that Wolf is in the same vein of me and Fion, where we just love the romantic aspect of the narrative. Yep. We want to believe it's an anime and a movie, but it isn't, Wolf, even though I love you for that. Like, the same reason you know this. I was one of the worst enablers / hype men for like LS, when he would be like, so that's why it's like this anime, like, yeah, spit that shit, go on, tell them more about how it's like anime and video games. Meanwhile, you know, your Mark Cannon them like, can't we just talk about traffic? No, shut up. He's trying to explain how like red in Magic the Gathering works, like freezing the waves. Just shut up. So anyway, speaking of freezing though, and not shutting up, you know something, Monty? This is going to seem really weird for a plug or an advert, spoiler, # ad.
Oh boy.
Which is, you're going to probably think, right, come on, Thorin, you know, pitch the product if you want, say what you like about it, say what they tell you is the talking points, but don't oversell it. All I'm going to say is this. I was thinking about Freeze Pipe, you know, just one of those sponsors I sort of gets in my mind a little bit more, you know, it's the sort of thing that I'm into. And what I realized was, if I'd have known about Freeze Pipe's patented technology, Monty, I don't actually know if it's patented technically. That part's just inserted by me there. I'd lived not. Their technology, there you go. I've no idea if they have a patent or not. Like freezing stuff, don't know if that's patented or not. If I'd have known about their technology, Monty, and I'd have understood the philosophy that it represents, I could have avoided so much trouble in my life and my career. Because I was thinking the other day, right? You know, I often point out, it's only when all these months ago I finally stopped reading stupid Twitter replies. That's finally when I sort of was able to chill a little bit and go back to just being me, basically, not have to be this drama monster. So what I realized was this: in life, what you're going to do is, when you feel this impulse that you want to do something, you've got to freeze, plan out how best to proceed, and let cooler heads prevail. So here's the thing. If you wanted to smoke weed, to smoke cannabis, Monty, I know, you know, I don't know whether you would. I certainly do want to. I'd like to do it right now, but I
do enjoy it from time to time, for sure.
Problem with me is I've just got a show right now. But basically, if I was going to smoke cannabis, what I would do is I would freeze the glycerin chamber from my freeze pipe for 1 hour in the freezer section, at which point in time, when I then was to smoke said pipe bong, Monty, as the smoke went into that chamber, with their technology, it would be instantly chilled to over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't even know what 300 degrees Fahrenheit is. And I wouldn't even be able to tell you if I was high, or I'd have a better chance of guessing at that point in time, because I'm just from Europe. And so basically, you can also enjoy this new approach or philosophy to life with 10% off using the code LFN at thefreezepipe.com.
There you go. And do you wish that you would have had a freeze pipe for your Twitter so that you could have cooled your tweets by over 300
Yeah,
degrees
the problem is,
Fahrenheit?
Monty, I used to go on social media and I would get hot under the collar. I would get irritated. I'd be spitting that hot fire, but it was hurting me too, Monty. And in the end, freeze pipe technology or philosophy would have allowed me to have that cooler head that could prevail, to not get irritated and have that hot coughing sensation. Instead, I would have only been coughing to clear my throat. Right, that's all fire there. Everything there was great. Just cut that. We're going with that one. That's the one we're going with, guys. It's in the can. It's all good. Send it in. Oh, this is live. Oh shit, man. Right, no, whatever. Anyway, I think that was a pretty good commercial, to be fair. We even had some real, like, actual advice for how to use social media there. There's actual value add, even if you don't care about weed. And spoiler, I do care about weed. Right, so obviously, sadly, this is in some ways we always did on Someone Insight address things we don't like, Ross. But this is almost like where I feel like I have to invoke the terminology we had on By the Numbers of petty grievances, because the first section of this show, even though you're probably all going to think at home, surely that Danny story's put to bed now, and it is. Like, let's be real. Beyond him being beyond some sort of punishment or investigation from Riot, in theory, all the legitimate facts were already known before this last week. They were known after me and Richard's story, and a few extra details were speculated on. Learn what the code means, you idiots. We're just telling you what happens, but we can't say that that was a fact. Some of it was speculated on the Four Horsemen, which is obviously on this channel as well. But since then, we've had these two incidents where, one, we had this guy who I only know from some guy who was like being stupid on Twitter called Arsh Goyal, who at the time last year when I saw him on Twitter was like claiming he was an intern at Dignitas. Now, I will say, I don't know what intern even means. That is genuine. If people don't know, in a real company, that is the guy who gets you the tea and the water and doesn't actually do any real work. That's the point of an intern. It's an unpaid job usually that you do nothing. I don't know if it's in, but basically he was an intern. Now, I will say, some person I know at Dig, when they saw him attacking me, were even like, I'm actually in Dignitas and quite high up, and I don't even know who this person is. So I will say that. Then all I'll say is this: if you ever look on his Twitter bio, it now does say former Dignitas. It doesn't even say former Dignitas intern. Like, bro, when you were an intern there and your main resume is like, I used to work at Dig. All right, what do you do there, intern? Sorry, what? Well, you know, this, that, the other intern. What? So I didn't catch that. Anyway, so that sort of tells you the level. The point is, this isn't like a famous journalist or something, but he decided for whatever reason, as far as I can tell, quite frankly, I know everyone else put this down to like great intent. No, as far as I can tell, he's among the circle of small people at the bottom of a lot of orgs and people in the scene, like fans of NA LCS players, who just decided, and I think this is terrible, by the way, to just go, I think I'll just have a go at playing journalist. What? There's me old cap. I'm on the beat. Hey, guys, look, I'm revealing stuff too. Here's more info. And you know what? I can corroborate or not corroborate what was said by the most respected journalist in the industry who worked there for 20 years.
What?
So basically,
What?
he wrote this whole thing.
An intern was more credible than two guys who have won 3 esports journalist of the year between them?
Who knows? Who knows? But the point was, he did a write-up, right, where it was literally, by the way, this isn't even a meme. It was literally published on medium.com. So it was that level above a twitlonger. He just did an article where he reiterated a bunch of things me and Richard said. As I said, by the way, just as an aside, he is in no position to ever corroborate anything I have said or written in my career because he doesn't have my sources. And I'll just go ahead and say right now, I would guess my sources are better. And not only that, I actually know what the word corroborate means. I know if you were to look it up in a dictionary, you think it just means to confirm something. No, that's just colloquial usage. When a journalist says corroborate, what they mean is this: I can claim that is a fact. I have proven it independently in a manner which is very unlikely could turn out to be wrong. Well, spoiler, in his article, in which he did lay out some more details that me and Richard didn't mention, spoiler, some of these things are things we couldn't corroborate, or one person told you that, or even worse. I'll just say this. I might do a whole video on it. In the actual article, I even saw people name-checked in ways that would be favorable, Monty, that I could tell you right now, if those people had been sources, I suspect they weren't. They would have actually said, please don't name-check me in that exact way. That's exactly what I don't want, and I don't want this associated to the idea I could in any way have been a leak. So this, what I'm basically getting at is, you might have felt like all gossip and drama, like, oh, it's novel, like we got something out of this. You almost didn't, guys. Beyond maybe if some of those private convos of what people did or didn't say were true, which certainly would add some spicy flavor, what actual facts came out of that? And then after that, there's two aspects that a lot of people missed the second one. So obviously everyone like us on Four Horsemen was calling out Travis, weren't they? And saying like, why are you addressing this? Like, what, you're not going to say anything. You're not even going to have anyone else do something. So one, Mark Z, as I call him, came along and he did the blame game and did an episode about Danny. And then they had like a hotline league where Travis and them sort of maybe didn't address the topic, right? I've got a few things here and I'll just see where you're at on it. So basically, first and foremost, I think it's mega inappropriate to do an episode of The Blame Game about a topic like this. Bro, that's the feature you do for our people on Reddit, write about like who's to blame in like a roster drama or like in the game, did someone int? Bro, that is so beyond the pale to use that series. Like by this logic, right? I'm going to say this as a real example because I'm serious. Like, where is the line for this guy, Monty? By that logic, if someone accused someone who was a pro of rape, Would he do a blame game episode? Like, well, let's get into it, guys. Here's what he said. Here's what she said. Now, at the end, who did do the crime or who's making it? He wouldn't, because that would be so unreasonable. So I thought, by the way, first of all, it was in really bad taste, in my opinion, to do that episode. And then secondly, he didn't get to the meat and bones of it anyway. Like, as far as I can tell, the approach from Travis, Travis's friends, and people who are in Travis's circle, all of whom, by the way, have direct connections to Nicole LaPointe Jameson, if not are literal friends, if not, you can find their Twitter littered with back and forth little tit for tat, like, oh, love you, homie, boss, bitch, like all that shit. You can find it all. So these people are mega connected. None of them will fucking say that person's name. They'll never mention that name, Monty. Magically, I made this point on Twitter. If anything happens in TSM, we're supposed to believe Lena's not even involved. It's just Reggie. He's like one maniac affecting everyone. But in Evil Geniuses, there is no maniac. It is just the nebulous Evil Geniuses management. And I notice almost everyone saying Evil Geniuses management is someone who directly has connections and associations, if not has been paid by or benefited from a personal relationship with the very management they're not calling out. That's actually a way to not call out your friend. What you're doing there is going, whoever did this, whoever they might be, well, just say, isn't it your friend? No, but whoever they are, that's just bad. And then if you're the same people, by the way, who called Carlos like out by name for a tweet, you just have no leg to stand on whatsoever, my dude. There's no leg whatsoever for you to stand on. Just stick to spitting really quickly. Some people, you know what? Some people can talk really quick, but they think so damn slow, don't they? Have you ever noticed that? It's weird how that works, isn't it? Yeah. You know, some people still obsessed with blocks and deflecting. What, you mean like how Nicole LaPointe Jameson blocked Danny from maintaining a healthy weight and continuing on his, what could have been a burgeoning esports career? Or do you mean deflected, like you guys deflected all the blame from her and won't call her? Because here's the point I'm going to get to. It's my final point on this, and then you can jump in anywhere. There's so much you could discuss there. I'll just say this, Monty. It might feel to people like, oh, thank goodness, since Thorin's sort of like, for whatever fucking reason, I've never told a single lie in my entire professional career, but because I'm supposedly persona non grata in League of Legends, and obviously Richard is just straight banned in an insanely corrupt fashion from Reddit, I think a lot of people cheered on the Arsh thing and cheered on Hotline League because they just think like, at least the story didn't die. At least there's another day being mentioned and people. But I actually think I need to point this out. Look at the way the story is morphed, though, because the story from everyone after me and Richard. So once it got to the Arsh guy, whose entire conclusion section, by the way, was about how we shouldn't name check any of these people and blame them, and that's some systemic issue. They've done more harm than good, in my opinion, Monty. Not only did the Arsh guy get multiple actual facts wrong, which he had to instantly retract. Spoiler, my dude, when you get a fact wrong, publish it on the internet about someone, and then instantly have to change and go, my bad, I was completely wrong. That means A, you never corroborated that. You don't even know what corroboration means. And more importantly, B, every other fact or detail you mention is now able to be called into question because you don't know what journalistic practice is. By the way, there's a reason why if you ever read a Richard Lewis article, you'll maybe once in a blue moon see an edit or a retraction. Because he knows if I fuck up these details or if I'm just talking up my house on half the story, the whole house of cards comes down, because this sort of journalism where you never will see the logs of the conversations or hear the calls or meet the people has to rely on the credibility of who's the messenger. It actually does. That's the most important thing. And the final thing to say, like I said, is I feel like the actual conclusion people have taken from Arsh, Mark Z, and Travis's work is don't blame the actual only people that we know did this to this guy. Instead, blame it on literally society and the entire esports industry. Like we're actually pretending for real, cause other teams, this is the little game they're playing, Monty, the game of like bait and switch. They're taking a thing where a guy repeatedly said, like, I can't play. All these people around him, he shouldn't play. He's not in any condition. He must leave. People repeatedly, no, he must play. He will play. He will play. Can you convince him to play? Take him into a room.
We need it. We need him to continue to play so that he can be sold during the off season. So that
people are trying to
dupe other teams into taking this guy that we know is burned out.
So there's one position, right? And they've taken that, Monty, and they've flipped it to, most esports orgs aren't equipped to handle autistic people.
Oh,
holy shit! How are those? By the way, if that was the beginning of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, like you wouldn't even get a second. The ball would just instantly drop. The ball, you'd be dead, wouldn't you? Like that is not an equivalent trade, and I feel like that part is really disturbing to me because I don't want this at the end to be remembered as, wow, the whole esports industry doesn't really understand autistic people. As if you'd have to fucking tell me that, by the way. As if you were fucking nobody would have to tell me that about the way the world works. And then after that, you go, but anyway, la 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 la. since it look over here at the systemic problems, let's not blame Nicola Point Jameson, Gamer Dark, all the people who actually did this shit. Come on, bro. Like, go on then, give me your tip. There's a lot you can work with there. What are you jumping in on?
Just the immediate thing about the systemic take is just that the systems themselves were implemented by Nicole LaPointe Jameson and GamerDoc. Like, we know that. These are not leftover systems from an earlier version of Evil Geniuses. These aren't Alex Garfield systems that were then given to them. Like, the systems were implemented by the people in charge at EG when Peak 6 bought the team. So somebody must be responsible for those systems. And also, as for blaming other teams and saying, well, burnout is a huge problem and like this could have happened anywhere. Well, it really hasn't. Number one, like it really hasn't. And also, that is the nature of a high level of competition. That is just the nature of sports. And the whole time, if you guys have noticed about if you rewind to our shows from last year where we're talking about Danny, we absolutely support Danny retiring as a professional player. And we literally have long conversations about some people are just unable to handle this level of stress. And that's not a fault. It's just the nature of the industry, and there's no escaping from it, right? Some people can be very talented, but not cut out for the level of grind, the level of competition, being in the spotlight, the criticism from fans, all of these things. And it's totally okay to take a step back. But there isn't going to be a point where we get away from this, and we can't change the system to be more friendly. That's not what a high level of competition is. Like, go be a streamer, which is what he's going to be doing, right? It's a different kind of industry. So I don't know. I think that the whole thing is pretty outrageous. I don't like the fact that people won't comment on this and they won't actually assign the blame that is very obvious is baffling to me.
Did you also notice it felt like the people I was sort of calling out by association, Monty, only commented when it was felt like they weren't then commenting on me or Richard's work. They were commenting on the next, that. Notice how, because I'll just say it about Captain Flowers straight up. One, he was in the literal world type video where they mock everyone else talk about while this Danny shit had already happened.
The world type video, let's clarify for people. He was hired by Evil Geniuses to be in a hype video with Avali and Nicole LaPointe Jameson in the video to hype up EG at World. So he was being paid.
It was a funny video
to appear with the person he should be calling out.
So here's the thing. It was a funny video, but that all happened, remember, after this had already taken place. It already qualified for Worlds, obviously. And here's the key thing. Don't let anyone lie to you. This was an open secret behind the scenes. Like, people had heard the rumors already in the off season, especially, by the way. So, like, even if you didn't know right at that moment when you did the video, you knew before now. You knew before 2023 put out with. Like, people have even tried to come in these Reddit threads and go, we already knew some of this. Yeah, it was an open secret. It's just no one dared to say it. That's the crux of it. So what people don't get is, the reason I called him out is because he was one of the people straight out the gates to call Carlos out. Straight in a tweet, just his name. His fucking name, his mother gave him when he was born. But magically, when it's his friend Nicole, can't say shit. Can't say shit. I ain't got anything to say. I even called him out. And what did he do? Rather than, none of them, by the way, these people, this is a red flag for bad human beings. They'll never just go, well, actually, I am sort of a piece of shit and won't call my friend out. So I'll have the good decency to just say nothing. He tried to deflect me asking, basically, like, why is your friend, who you're now pretending to call out as EG management, why are they abusing this player? What he did was just deflect into some shitty thing of like, yeah, but you blocked me. And then all the peanut gallery like, they're trying to pull him. And that's esports for you, mate. That's esports. We're even talking, by the way, about our young man's life potentially being ruined. He was medically underweight to the extent they were like, we might need to hospitalize you, mate. And then when someone goes, that's a bit fucked up, isn't it, Flowers? Maybe call him out by name. Ha! What about that time you blocked me? That's, by the way, what that shows you is these people don't treat any of this as serious, mate. Because I'll go ahead and say this, especially in light of how he responded. I don't actually believe Captain Flowers. I don't believe he really cares about Danny. Spoiler, he's exactly the one I haven't checked, but he's exactly the sort of cocksucker who, when Danny made that stupid, obviously fake tweet, we're all in his replies like, lol, go King, yeah, support you, love you. As though that was ever real. Like, you already supported the cover-up in that case. Or I don't know if he directly, but it was definitely in the vein of people who did. did. And so what I'll say is this, like, that just looks, by the way, dude, when you've known behind the scenes the whole story, when you avoid the most respected journalists bringing the story, and at the end, when everyone's downplayed it as much as possible, it's become this thing where you don't have to call your friend out by name. You see which way the wind's blowing completely, you go, shit, everyone agrees this is bad. Time for me to make sure they know I think it is bad and get my free likes and clout. You come in, you make your point. So in that scenario, like, now Danny's just a fucking pawn in your social media game. Come on, bro. Because that's the thing I can't abide by almost more than the crime, Monty, is where these people, like, afterwards have to, like, thumb their nose at you. Like, Nicole LePoint Jameson has to come in and go, we always supported you, Danny. Like, why'd you have to put that on top of... You've already done it all. You've even probably got away with it at this point in time. Like, why'd you have to, like, sort of, like, mock us on the way out of the fucking courtroom, as it were? Come on, guys. This is gross.
Yeah, I look, and going back, I think what Captain Flowers did and other people are doing is reprehensible in that they are not actually being specific about this. Because here's the thing. You have to come down very hard if you want to actually punish the bad actors in the space. We can't be nebulous about this. You have to nail them down so they don't just slip away and back into the industry. This is the only way we clean this up. Okay, guys? So if you start deflecting the blame, you yourselves are building a shield that they can hide behind and continue to be bad actors in the future. Now, my opinion is that these people can just go ahead and fuck off out of the industry. They're not like, what happens? Real question. What happens if Nicole LePoint Jameson is never in esports again? What do we lose? Nothing. We don't lose anything, guys.
Maybe like, some funny hype videos. That's about it, though.
Some funny hype videos, some teary Twitter posts. Like, I don't really understand because she's not super experienced in the industry by industry standards. She hasn't built something that is even remotely enviable. Like, let's talk about the accomplishments of EG recently, okay? So ever since 2019, what has EG done in the esports space? So they've lost their core Dota player in Arteezy, who was probably, the biggest person under the EG brand during this time frame.
In the modern day, he's easily the most iconic player associated with EG. He might even be an all-time at this point if you think about the era when he was, it's like a solid 10 years or something, right?
So I mean, EG, as we discussed on the Four Horsemen, the crown jewel was this Dota roster.
Yes.
They now have a South American, I guess mostly Peruvian Dota roster for the Peru Major, but they lost all of the major players that made them one of the central brands and main competitive forces in Dota. So we've seen the Dota team slide backwards into effectively irrelevance. What we have CSGO, they went from a kind of middling North American team into a laughing stock right now with a system that makes no sense about how they're going to develop players.
Actually, even worse than that, Monty, because when they bought the lineup, they actually inherited a world-class elite, like the world #1 contender team, and they just roared it down until eventually now it's genuinely, like I said on the Four Horsemen, for a big name org with big money and big salaries, it's one of the worst teams ever competitively in the results, ever. Like, as in, if you go, think of the main two leagues, Blast and ESL, Pro League, right? If you go look, Monty, something like the last 3 Blast lands, they've come last place. Then in the Pro League, they've come like last place or second to last, like for the last 5 seasons. Like, if people don't know, you know those rules in LCS and LEC where people always complain, like, when's Golden Guardians going to get kicked out the league? Like, the joke is if they were ever enforced, Evil Geniuses wouldn't even be in a CSGO league right now. That's how bad it has gotten. It's just spoiler. Those rules, in case you're a fan, aren't to kick out the Evil Geniuses. That's when, like, someone like Ents that you don't give a fuck about's tiny and they do badly, you kick them out. The joke is, because you're allowed to selectively choose whether you enforce that, they'll never kick a big org like EG out. So no, in CSGO, they're a laughing stock, mate. Genuinely a laughing stock. Like, you saw it. People like actually like get hyped just to watch them lose now because of how funny it is.
Yeah, and
Sad,
now in League of Legends, they finally won a title. That is an accomplishment. But then the coaching staff that won you that title is all gone now. Impact, one of the most valuable players that you had under your brand, decided to leave the team. By the way, because he didn't like the management. That's why he left. And now you are like good enough, I guess, for LCS, but teams like Cloud9 and FlyQuest appear to be just better overall. So I think it's very hard to talk about what the actual accomplishments of this management is. 2 of their 3 divisions in CS:GO and in Dota have slid backwards. Valorant, their Valorant team isn't any good
It's
right now.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, their Valorant team is not any good. I'm not even sure why they were allowed into partnerships, given the track record that they had coming in, when a team like Optic was left out. Pretty suspicious, have to say.
And also aged so insanely poorly in light of the Danny shit that was going on at exactly the time that they selected you. You know the best part about all this, guys? The actual Danny shit where they were forcing him to play took place something like 2 weeks before the Carlos shit, when everyone agreed Carlos could, within something mad. You remember it was like 3 days or something, Monty, that they'd revoked that spot. So the real joke is that also's aged so badly. The idea Riot now decides whether you get your spots on moral grounds. By the way, the idea Riot would ever be the fucking person. By the way, I've got one quick thing to add in as well.
I'm not done.
Oh, sorry, go on.
And then what are they doing on the content side? They have an EG creator collective where, if you guys go look up that YouTube channel, is getting sub 100 views a video.
Who's in the collective, by the way, aside from Danny? Who else is in it?
Exactly.
No
Who is it? Who is in it? Nobody that I've ever heard of. Here's the one that'll blow your mind, Thorin. They had an interview with Stewie2K that had like 300 views recently. How do you even do an interview with Stewie2K and get like 300 views? That's actually impossible. I like the algorithm should help you out with that. So their content is doing absolute garbage. They lost some big streamers, like they used to have Tarek, for example, and now he left. So what is this business? Because they are spending a bunch of money on like studio productions and highly edited videos for their creator collectives that are getting double-digit views, no joke. Their main YouTube used to be powered by the Dota team, and now they're gone. So now their main YouTube doesn't get any views on anything. Even the League of Legends content gets, you know, a couple thousand views for their like weekly docuseries. So I don't know how they're bamboozling sponsors. They took Chevron as a sponsor recently.
The timing on that's amazing as well.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it?
Whatever it is, I know.
And here's the other thing, Thorin. They lost their 10-year-old sponsorship with Monster Energy, which we talked about on the Four Horsemen. That is one of the foundational sponsor arrangements in esports in North America. It was probably, Degon pointed out that maybe Scuff Gaming and Optic has been for an equivalent period of time, which is, I think, a good observation. Yeah. But it is one of the longest running team brand relationships in esports.
Oh, it's another super iconic one. Absolutely. Yeah.
And by the way, it's not like Monster pulled out of esports. They still sponsors Team Liquid. They pulled out of EG. So that tells you something about EG. Then you also have the fact that during this entire saga that has unfolded over the last few weeks, no one has actually come to the defense of EG management. 0 people, guys. They are so unlikable and so incompetent that nobody who works there, nobody who even formerly works there, remember, you can say nice things. So why hasn't anyone outside of the team who formerly worked at EG being like, no, I loved working there? Isn't that just a little bit suspicious? It's weird when you have no defenders. Absolutely. I mean,
the example would be when TSM and Reggie had that drama, out came Dyrus, out came all the names you know from the old school. Because in that scenario, by the way, look, they weren't well received. Like I saw Dyrus just got like 1 million people in his mentions. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, why are you defending? But his whole thing, even in his case, even was just like, I was talking about when I was there. Like, you could have people come and do that. Like, as you're saying, Monty, you could even have someone who just from the beginning of their tenure, like in 2019 at the beginning of the CSGO or the Dota team for EG, they could just be like, I thought it was all right for the time. No, yeah, you're right. Nobody wants to put their name next to this or put their hammer themselves to that mast, as it were. So who the fuck would want to be associated with this shit now?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm very curious to see how this goes forward. Now, I don't know what Riot is going to do. Like, surely they must have opened a different investigation at this point in time, and we're going to have to wait to see how it plays out. But the other thing that this revealed, as we've discussed previously, is that Riot themselves were fooled by EG. And I think, knowing Riot, that is the thing that will piss them off the most, is that their own incompetence was revealed because they just took the bait of the substitute issue, hook, line, and sinker. Yep. And this is why, if you're running a league, you cannot change the rules, because even though the rules are stupid, you have to assume a worst case scenario of a team abusing those rules.
Dude,
And
I'll
at the
tell you right
time-
now, the obvious example. Let's not take some small fry shit, right? Obviously, we're going to speculate now, Monty. We would never refer to a real human being called Bill Belichick, the legendary coach of the New England Patriots. But imagine hypothetically, there was a guy who was a really amazing NFL coach called Bill Belichick.
Belichick.
But the thing about Will Belichick, Monty, is he is a serial cheat. He will use any method in his arsenal to cheat. If he can film your team's practices, he'll film it. If he can steal your team's calls, he'll steal them. You think this guy, by the way, this is exactly the rule he would definitely abuse. He would like abuse this rule, no joke, and draft some player like when he had like a semi-injured, but he would do it right before the playoffs and he would like win a fucking ring doing this. I'm telling you, like, if you know how sports works, like there are people at the stakes of sports would just do this, mate. Like, I know everyone now goes, but why would anyone abuse a rule? Like, come on, bro. Like, you got to grow up if you still think that. Come on. Because I think there really is a world where, like, after this, there's a lot of people could try for something like this, especially if you're on the brink. Remember when they did it of like, you don't make worlds or you need to make the next one, or like, that's exactly when you do it, innit?
Yep. Well, we'll have a Danny and our editor go back to when we were talking about how you can't do this because it could be abused in the future.
Yep.
And the way we said it could be abused when this was happening was that you could basically fake a crisis because mental health is not as easily and concretely diagnosable as a physical injury.
And it's unquestionable. You're not allowed to question it.
You're not allowed to question it. So you could actually swap out for a better player on the academy team, which is, by the way, what EG did. He, at that point in time, with Danny's degradation from everything that he was subjected to, plus the meta change, although I feel like probably Danny would have been able to switch with the meta better if he had been in a healthier state in order to practice more and like be actually focused on the game. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that Cowrie was a better player than Danny in that meta at that time. And now we know that the actual nefarious thing that happened was that they didn't list Cowrie as a substitute. And we can't know this for sure, by the way, guys, but it was likely partially to put pressure on Danny to continue to play because he wouldn't have a backup, right? He wouldn't be able to say, guys, I can't do it today, just put Cowrie in. Right? Because EG could then say, well, that's against the rules. He's not the substitute. We have this coach here in the room instead.
And you made the point yourself on the Four Horsemen. The reason why that's even more significant is what has since come out that it sounds like they were going to try and ship Danny off in the offseason. Well, if he just keeps skipping out and Cowrie comes in, who's ever going to buy him? Instead, if you make it look like they did, which is the only bit, like the genius how they did it is this, Monty, because he played all those series that they won, like a couple of big ones, it just looks like, it was just like the stress of that TL series at the end. That just got to him. So you know what? He needed a few weeks off. Maybe I'll buy him. That's exactly, by the way, how you think in the stock. I'll buy low, like maybe I can benefit, you know.
They were also hoping he could just get through that one last weekend, right? They were very cynically being like, just like, come on, just like this one last weekend in Chicago. If we can get him through there, we can actually just ship him off, sell him on a high note.
That would have been the dream. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so the thing is that Riot got bamboozled because they made this emergency substitution without knowing that it was actually some nefarious machinations behind the scenes of EG. And it was a well-known problem at that point in time about his mental health. Like they knew everything that was going on. They abused the situation. They allowed it to reach a crisis. And then Riot allowed them a competitive advantage as a result of their own incompetence. And so if I'm Riot, I mean, I'm just saying, if I was commissioner of LCS, I would be so fucking mad. I would be outraged because I do think that Riot genuinely tried to do the right thing by Danny, but what it did was it enabled and validated all of EG's bad actions up until that point in time. And so I don't see how a punishment doesn't come from Riot for that reason alone. Right? They abuse the system very badly to achieve a competitive goal.
Bro, in Korea, when some players just memed and picked troll champions to do a tribute to fucking Cloud Templar, they got banned from the league. Like, you're actually allowed to pick those champions. They just would troll picks. Like, if that gets you banned, this has to get some punishment. You actually just smuggled a player who had no business being on your roster into a series, and everyone forgets this detail, Monty. The only thing that saved this fucking shambles is that they didn't win that game 5 against 100 Thieves, mate. Because if they would won that 100 Thieves, mate, my video would have been 10 times spicier because I would have just straight out have called it like Evil Geniuses of the LCS just cheated 100 Thieves out of the final spot. Like, that is so beyond the pill because you know this as well. Like, Danny, towards the end of those series, was looking so ropey and Cowrie looked way better with the eye test. By the way, just to rewind earlier, one detail I do know, which is part of why, sadly, some of the industry people are also soft selling or downplaying the whole like management issue and should we blame people, it's because they themselves don't want to be called out, right? I want to make a key distinction because I'm not calling out willy-nilly everyone in the industry. Like, you work in League, you must call out the thing of Danny and say evil geniuses and Nicole are scum. No. If you notice, it's just like with the virtue signalers. I don't go and call out, I'll give you an example now. I don't call out people like Scrawny, who works with Blast, etc. I don't go, why don't you talk about ESL and all that stuff with the Saudis? Like, don't you have a problem with it? I don't do that because he's not someone who's flexing it all the time. If you're Frankie and you flexed it, now, actually, by the way, it's not even me. Someone should call out and go, wait a minute, you're going to say this one day and then do the other the next day. So if you notice, the people I'm calling out are the ones who either A, were right up Carlos's arse calling him out. Because I've said this at the time, Monty, everyone didn't listen. I said, if you want this to be the standard, I accept your terms. But it's not. That's what a precedent is. That precedent lasts forever now. So now if that's what you do when someone does a tweet you don't like, my God, what are you going to do if your friend or someone who pays you fucking malnourishes a child? What are you going to do? That I mean, colloquially, a child. Obviously, he is legally of age. I would say there, by the way, there's one thing maybe we could spin into at the end there. I would just say that I've made this point humorously and seriously many times in the past. You know, Thorin's rule of esports is you take the person's age and you subtract 5. Because my premise goes, they're all immature nerds and they're all just playing video games 14 hours a day since they're 12 years old. So they haven't matured as a person, had life experiences, and often haven't even had relationships, right? That is actually very applicable here, Monty. Because I would say if you actually wanted to have the discussion they clumsily were trying to do to deflect from EG blame of like, how do we treat young men in the esports industry? I would say that's a detail I do have a concern with. You know, I always make the point, I don't think the industry operates on principles and morals at all. It operates in theory on what you can get away with under the law. Now, notice I purposely said get away with, because you know the esports industry, most of the contracts in history rely on the idea this will never be enforced in court. Like, if you just believe it, then it looks like it's legal, and so we just go along with that scenario. I would say the bigger problem in esports is this. Legally, when you are 18 in countries like the USA, Germany, UK, you are considered an adult, but one, by default, the group of people who are pros in these games are not adults, even if they are 18 years old and physically an adult. And I would say compared to even the average 18-year-old youth, I think they are actually way more immature and way more vulnerable and likely to be exploited, quite frankly. So even though legally it might be like, you're an adult, only in the literal, legal, physical sense and the time that has passed since you were born. Like, I actually think that's the bigger issue to me, is if you know this, mate, if you ever talk to someone who's a rookie who's 18 or 19 in League, they could just be a 13-year-old kid, dude. Like, there's no crazy distinction. Like, when I talk to them, the idea they're going to know, like, contracts and am I being exploited and is this a reasonable... They're not going to know any of those things. So that one area I will agree with. I do think that's like something that should probably be discussed more, because we do just treat these guys as though they were like some 25-year-old NFL star. Like, well, he's a man and he knew what he was signing up for. It's like, not really. Not really.
No, I think most of the esports pros, not all, but many of them are, I would say, emotionally immature for their age. I think that's a very common.
Oh, mate, I'm speaking from personal experience. I was probably 10 years behind people, if that's the number then. Take 10 off, man. There you go. I just had my 30th birthday. It's not bad. There you go. I think that's enough for the Danny one, right?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Right, here's the thing. There's actually a bunch of things. I came prepared for this episode, believe it or not, because I thought of a bunch of topics we could discuss. Because I think some of these topics, dude, went mad under the radar. Like, how was it not an enormous discussion point that Nukeduck's the head coach of 100 Thieves? Shall I give you my angle on this? I think I've got a really unique angle, mate.
Okay.
Right? Everyone's going to look at that and think, well, he's not like a super media personality. He's a player. And, you know, he obviously is a player towards the end. Look, he was still respected, but he wasn't like a big star. I'm sure a lot of people are a bit nonplussed by it. They're like, okay, is that all right? If you don't know, guys, both go look at my interviews for start off. It's all over the place there. In interviews, and especially behind the scenes, Dude, this player is extremely rare out of European League of Legends players. This is the player that everyone who has played with them or coached them, sometimes even just their rivals, dude, raves about behind the scenes. Like, he is one of the smartest league players, like, ever, basically. They say, like, he's one of the only ones who understands, like, put it this way, mate, I had, like, K's and people like that who are analysts telling me, like, yeah, he really taught me a lot about wave management, actually. Like, dude, he's the mid laner and you're the analyst. By the way, that's not a diss against K's. The point is, K's is at a high level there. Normally, if you don't know, the Kelsey Moses of the world, that's why you bring them to teams. They have to teach the jungler, like, which wave to go in onto the top lane doesn't get his wave. This guy knows it, and he's teaching his teammates it. That's the reason. And then every coach says he's like a dream to work with. So I could actually see, by the way, on an X's and O's level, this guy could be amazing for fucking League of Legends. The only downside I have is he has been known, he's a little bit of more of like, let's say, I mean, Scandinavian, he's a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more, let's say, he's not super verbose, he's not going to talk a lot. So I would just say, to me, it's if he has the right bunch of players, if they vibe with him, I actually think he could be a very good coach, mate. I think this is a player where, even though people like to take the Bjergsons of the world and go, they'll definitely be a good coach because they were great at League. Like, no, the difference is Bjergsen had all those red flags, like never had a jungler that worked, teams collapsing, coach never worked. Nukeduck, mate, as a fucking, I think he's a shoo-in for this job. It's one of the best, like, player signings and gambles I think I've seen, because as I say, mate, this guy has an unbelievable, like, track record of social proof from the teams he's been on. Everyone says he's mustard.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing about this is that they kicked out Case as the head coach in order to make way for Nukeduck on this roster, and very similar things were said about Case. I think that Case really was like a hot commodity during some of these off seasons as teams were looking to hire coaching staff, and his game knowledge is also respected, and they just kicked him out. He's also a pro player, so we can't make the pro player is, he's respected as a coach by other pro players because he used to be a pro player argument. And I don't know if Nukeduck's going to be able to turn this team around, because the fact is that 100 Thieves just looks fucking terrible.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Even if literally what normally a coach would never do, Monty, you know, everyone always says that line, like, well, if I'm coaching Perks, I'm not telling him how to play. Nukeduck, please tell Bjergsen how to play mid lane in 2023. Please, because I've watched Bjergsen ever since he came back from that fucking time as a coach, and he's never been Bjergsen again, mate. He's had odd games where he was all right, or mid lane talent was just really whack. Like, I think some of these games they split. Here's what sucks about Bjergsen, dude. He does what it... The joke, I made this joke years ago, but everyone who hated on Froggen, Bjergsen is a worse version of everything you said Froggen became. Way worse. Because Froggen has still played to win lane, to win the team fight, to be ahead, to have winning matchups. Bjergsen does that reckless shit that I cannot abide by, dude, where you just start doing nothing when the game's going badly. And you lose the game, but because your scoreline says 1-2, it looks like you weren't the problem. It's the guy who died 6 times was, but like, that's just how a mid laner avoids responsibility. Like, I think he's been so whack this split, mate. Bearing in mind he's Bjergsen. Like, if you had to rank mid laners, yeah, he's probably still in the middle of the pack. Okay, that's fine. And by the way, I'll just say it right now. This is the comment that'll get people to hate on me. I think Jensen's been better at mid lane this split than fucking Bjergsen has. Sit the fuck down.
I don't think that's actually.
And he's elo held in easily one of the worst teams ever. He's in a really bad team, bro. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Gents fan. I just think for real, the eye test checks out, mate. He gives his team chances to win even if they don't. Bjergsen just does fuck all in these games and they just lose ungracefully.
I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, and maybe Case had to go because of conflicts with the players, but the problem is I don't know what 100 Thieves does well. Like 100 Thieves in this last week when they played against Cloud9, they picked Aurelion Sol. Now, the thing about Aurelion Sol is that I do believe, we don't have a lot of data on him in the professional scene. Like, I do believe if you treat him like a Kassadin, right? I was talking to Empire about
Get it through the lane and it'll carry. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was talking to Empire about this on the stream, yes. and this is a point that Empire made, because I was saying basically, like, when I was reviewing the Cloud9 versus 100 Thieves game, I was just saying, like, I don't think you can play a Zeri Lulu lane and get shoved in bot and then get shoved in mid on the Aurelion Sol, because you lose so much Drake priority, and early Drake priority just speeds up games right now. Everything is about playing through bottom lane, getting priority, taking early Drakes, threatening like 22 to 23 minute Dragon Souls, right? Accelerating the game, playing aggressively. This is what many of the best teams in the world are doing at the moment. And so if you're going to play Aurelion Sol, you really have to play something that's going to be very aggressive in the bot side so that you can cover for Aurelion Sol's weaknesses and allow him to scale. So I don't understand how 100 Thieves ends up with a composition that is Fiora, Sejuani, Aurelion Sol, Zeri, and Lulu, This doesn't enable anything. And Cloud9, it makes it so easy for Cloud9. So it's not even just that composition in isolation sucks. It's like they're not even trying to play their opponents, because Cloud9 has been playing an up-tempo game. They have been playing aggressively, right? That's been their style.
Yeah, of course.
So you also, if you're not even drafting to your specific opponent, you're not even trying to counter it. And then to complete the entire whiplash, the very next day, they play against CLG. And you know what they do? They completely 180. They go to a composition that we might see a team like T1 playing, right? We might see T1 playing it because they are the best team in the world and basically invented the current state of Gragas Lee Sin, that combo in the 2v2. And the thing about this combo is that you need to be super aggressive with it. You need to tower dive. You need to make plays. You need to just like all in the mid lane. And you know what they were playing into? They were playing into the jungle mid duo that they used the day before, Aurelion Sol and Sejuani. You have to dive the Aurelion Sol. You have to play aggressively. This is what this 2v2 does. It enables you to get priority and agency on the map. It allows you to punish scaling low mobility mid laners like Aurelion Sol. This is what it does. And they completely whiff on using this. So they can't run the scaling compositions. But you'll notice that CLG with Aurelion Sol used Kalista and Varus in bot lane. Guess why? Because that provides you through some bot lane priority. They can't do anything right. Like they can't play Caitlyn Lux properly. They can't play solid mid-jungle 2v2s properly. They can't play scaling compositions properly. This team is entirely incompetent. They do nothing. They literally do nothing well. Nothing well.
Oh, no, so you called it all those weeks ago. These are easily the biggest frauds. Because, like, you know, when Dom tried to counter, like, no, it's Team Liquid. Like, Team Liquid was fraud from day one, mate. These ones, at least on paper, should have been decent. Because everyone, like, I did the same thing, mate. You look at the lineup, you're like, surely at least Bjergsen and Doublelift will be, like, upper half of the league for their positions. And that alone will carry you to a few wins. Like, as you say, they have no win conditions on this team. They don't even play as a team, mate.
But it's also that they completely have no identity because they 180 their identity day to day. And they do it all badly, and their drafts are bad. I don't know where you go from here. Like, is switching the coach really the move?
Is like some of the players were pretty bad as well. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Closer and Doublelift are probably the two best players on this roster right now.
By the way, I'm just going to say this because obviously it's a pattern. Let's be real. Bro, how many fucking great junglers and LCS is Bjergsen going to have no synergy with? I've just seen Closer be good with everyone. He was good with Abedage. He was good with fucking Monte. Like, give me a break. Like, Bjergsen, this guy's actually one of the best junglers in the region. Like, if you can't fucking combo with him, like, what's even the point of playing mid lane anymore? Come on. He's the dream as well. He's a gank-heavy jungler.
Yes, and it's also that his early game was always his biggest strength.
That's what he loved,
right?
exactly.
Yep.
Yes. You would think they'd power through that mid and fucking wreck everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it is this team. I mean, and the state of the LCS is such that 100 Thieves, given their strength of schedule, is like probably going to make playoffs. And that's very depressing. Like, because Team Liquid is also super underwhelming. We're in a spot where 100 Thieves may be able to actually make a run here. And this team is just so terrible.
Also, by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there because everyone, me included, loved memeing on Reggie for all these years and how bad the team is, blah, blah, blah. Spoiler, Bjergsen and Doublelift, you look like fools now, mate. That TSM lineup is legitimately better than your lineup. And quite frankly, if you played them in the playoffs, I would take them to beat you in a best of 5. I fucking hope they play in the playoffs, dude. Because it's not like I have some love of Reggie and TSM, but I almost think like Bjergsen and Doublelift's hubris just needs to be exposed in a best of, you know, like ideally in the lower bracket as the elimination match.
Either way we win, right? Either way we win. I don't mind the narrative either way. Either the hubris is exposed or TSM is punished by having Doublelifted Bjergsen, you know, beat them after Reggie was like, nah, I don't want you shitter Doublelift on my team. So I'm okay with it either way. Either way, I'm happy.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I just the LCS is just really, I think, quite disappointing right now. I guess there's something nice a little bit about EG bouncing back, because you know they had been struggling, including losing to Dignitas the week before.
The thing with theirs as well is like it's the same as the beginning of the split. Like just the roster made no sense how dodgy they were looking, mate. That roster, it even still just looks like it should be the obvious one contender with FlyQuest to be the top team in the league. Just seems obvious, right? It's a quality roster of players. It's good.
Yeah, and swapping Impact for Someday is not the biggest stylistic change in the universe. Yeah. Like it feels like I do think Impact is better, but I mean, we got to see that matchup this past week with Someday playing the Stride Breaker Garen, which was pretty hilarious, right? But at the same time, I think my issue with FlyQuest is that Vikla, they tend to give up a lot of advantages in the early game and then have to claw their way back in through superior team fighting and mid to late game macro. But they shouldn't be falling behind this early. And certainly Vikla could be doing better and dying less in some of these laning phases, because a lot of the times when FlyQuest has been on the ropes, it's because their mid lane falls apart and they're trying to have to make up for it later. And Vikla has been able to do that, but definitely didn't happen in the game that they played against EG. And I don't know. I think FlyQuest becomes, even though I think they are clearly the best team in the league and will win the league overall, I don't understand why they're having such struggles in some of these early game positions that they find themselves in.
It's a joke how far ahead they are, though. Like what's funny is if this was actually a stacked LCS, I think C9 could have put themselves in real trouble with this like mid lane gamble and so on. They haven't missed a fucking beat, because the joke is they weren't going to beat FlyQuest anyway, so they beat everyone else, even with the fucking other mid lane. It doesn't matter, like you can do whatever you want, because the Cloud9 roster just fundamentally has a couple of players who are going to carry no matter what in Blabber and fucking Berserker. So as long as those players are there, you can just do whatever you want. Like none of the other teams are actually good enough. Like the parity is at least going to be decent for playoffs, but it's terrible for the championship. Like you say, basically it's either FlyQuest wins easily or they just drop the ball. That's it. There's no like, this team should beat them. Like even in a perfect world, EG could maybe give them a good series, but I don't think they'd beat them. There's no reason they should.
Yeah, and I think Cloud9 is powering up. Like the more we see the shift over to MNS, like I'm enjoying this more than Dplus, because I think the ceiling is higher. And
do you actually think that theory is true, by the way, that maybe like it's the other way around? Like maybe they always wanted to field the MNS guy, but they had some concerns, maybe he's toxic or maybe he has to like earn his
I have no idea. I haven't heard anything about that.
Because when you do look at the two of them, like mate, the eye test on him does check out way better than the Dplus guy. Come on. He just looks way better, doesn't he?
The only information I have is what's been talked about publicly.
No, so I'm just saying I
don't really have any behind the scenes information. I haven't really dug into that one at all. But I do think that outside of his first game, MNS has looked good, seems to have a better stylistic synergy, particularly with Blabber. And Fudge has returned to top lane in a much better form this year. So Cloud9 definitely on the radar for contesting for the title here. I think that that C9 and FlyQuest are really just a cut above right now. And the meta does seem like it favors C9 overall. Like they are able to play up tempo. They are able to play aggressively. Berserker and Sven are players that do want to kind of dominate that lane and push forward and try and make plays. So I do like what we're seeing from C9, and barring some sort of major meta shift that could occur, they're looking all right. They're looking all right. I'm not sure how much there is to say about the rest of LCS, frankly.
I mean, the obvious one I would say is just this. Since he's been memed on and he's been the victim of narrative so many years in his career, I would just say congrats to Inero, the GM of Golden Guardians, who was obviously the coach for many, many, many years, and finally got the keys to the car. And people criticized him, oh, he's just hiring all people with like his friends or from the Ost region that he knows, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, not only did Golden Guardians have many lineups under his tenure that were way better than they should have been. Spoiler, the fucking core of the 100 Thieves team came from his Golden Guardians. But look how he's rejigged the team now. This looks actually really good. Like some of these players, like I thought the River guy looked all right on Dig, but then wasn't quite as good as he should have been. Some of these other players, like I thought Licorice was washed, quite frankly. I would have said, get rid of him, get a rookie in there, you know. You look at the rest of the team, imagine telling someone the team with Sticks here is going to be ahead of fucking Bjergsen and Doublelift, like convincingly ahead, by the way. Like, mate, this lineup's actually no joke, like way more than the sum of their parts. It's actually some not bad players, but it just comes together way better than you'd think.
I would argue that in Licorice's case, if they replaced him with one of many other players, that perhaps this would be an even better team. Might be you know, competing.
No, but I thought he would be in like, you know, I was expecting him to be in like the 9th place team, like old Golden Guardians, you know, exactly.
River was good last year. I think what makes Golden Guardians good is that they have been able to scout underappreciated talent very effectively. And they've also been able to get some players that may have been on downswings in their career through no fault of their own, like Gory. Because when Gory was on Nongshim Red Force, he was kind of a hyped, like up and coming mid lane player. And then he got signed and went over to FunPlus Phoenix in China and then PSG Talon towards the end of last year. And so he kind of got lost, even though he was really, really hyped at some point in time. So I imagine Golden Guardians got a pretty good deal on Gory and was like, well, he's still young. I think he's like in his early 20s. Why don't we just try and see if this guy works, if we can get value? Because we've seen that he did at least appear to have a high ceiling at a certain point in time in the past. And we have another Korean player in River to kind of match him up with. And it turns out he might have just been in a bad situation or stuck on PSG Talon for a bit.
Also
Over
been
in
on some
Taiwan.
amazing orgs. Like if people don't know, he was on T1, EDG, and FPX orgs. So you can imagine this guy must have had some crazy experiences, a very interesting coaching background. Like actually, if you're going to test someone out in a smaller region, this is how you do it. I think this approach where you pick up the Gories, the Malrangs of the world, like these are the sorts of players to gamble in the West, in my opinion. It's pretty good pickup.
Yeah. And I think also it's hard sometimes to evaluate Korean players when they go to China because not everybody takes well to that environment. And at least for Koreans, most of them have an easier time being in LA than they do in China because it's culturally more similar. And there's just a lot of Koreans in Los Angeles. There's a lot of, Korean restaurants, food, culture. So it's less of a culture shock, I think, than being in certain parts of China. And yeah, I think he was also in China during like the peak of the COVID era. You know what I mean? And so the lockdowns, I think, were probably pretty harsh on the players who were there. So point is that you can't necessarily judge a dip in performance because it could have been environmentally related. And Gory has turned out to be an excellent pickup for Golden Guardians, and River and Gory, as well as Stixay, kind of returning to form, have been really hallmarks of this team. And as you say, I think Anero is doing a very good job. And I think Danon also did a good job in terms of assembling like quality rosters before when they basically maxed the value of the dollar that they were getting a lot of the time.
They were working with very small budgets in case people don't know.
Yeah, so they've done a lot with a little and deserve to be lauded for that. Like I do wish that we had a backup to Licorice that might be able to be used here, but it looks like a good team.
Yeah, but here's the other angle on the
like
Licorice one is this, Monty, right? If you're Golden Guardians at the moment, since you have all these different player changes, you're also fielding Licorice because he's your only name value player for NA fans, like at least he still has positive associations. Everyone likes him. They passed on Cloud9. I also think that's initially why they tried this lineup. So maybe in the future split, they do bring someone else in because if you could get the right rookie, it would obviously be the upgrade, wouldn't it? Like this team could get quite dangerous if they had a carry top laner.
I mean, I even think if they obviously, like, I'm a fan of Revenge, but I think that even Revenge on this team would be a pretty significant upgrade over Licorice because they don't need a top laner who's going to be the big carry. Like they're winning based off of their mid and jungle synergy right now and enabling River and Gory. So I think if you have a stable top laner, that this makes a lot of sense.
We're just looking for someone who's going to play like fucking Sion, all the classics.
Yeah,
just classic weak side.
Yeah, you can get a bunch of you can get players like this.
Yeah, for sure.
That on a budget, I think that isn't super high. But yeah, I think Golden Guardians has been a very welcome surprise in the LCS, and it looks like at least between FlyQuest and Golden Guardians, we may end up with a more surprising final with new teams, which I also think the LCS needs. I have a sneaking suspicion that Cloud9 is just going to sweep through and take it again randomly, but we'll see. We will see.
Cloud9's going to win the whole league.
It's possible, man. I think with the way they look right now and the fact that the meta seems to be trending in their direction and the MNS switch, if they can abuse FlyQuest weak early game and Vikla, I think it's definitely possible that they can win.
I mean, it's
We'll find out.
possible, but that's also, in my opinion, though, why this playoffs is going to be mega interesting. Because bearing in mind Cloud9, like, look, the rest of the roster is really experienced, but the Eminence guy knows fuck all about LCS playoffs. Then you go and look, like, Evil Geniuses obviously has a pretty good roster, but just hasn't fully come to peak power yet. FlyQuest has all those players who just never played in LCS before. Like, who knows how the playoffs is going to go, mate? I feel like it's a complete crapshoot at the moment. Like, and also remember, because of the way the LCS works with all those spots, the playoffs is like a mini season of its own, in it. So, like, you almost don't even carry that much from this regular split into the playoffs. Like, once playoffs begins, it's a whole new meta, a whole new fucking meta game of like what people are picking. So, I think it's going to be really exciting, put it that way. Really exciting.
And also, I would say that FlyQuest also might be just fucking around. Like, they're already qualified for playoffs. They've already locked a playoff position. And, you know, for the most part, because of the way that the format operates within LCS and the top 6 teams are going to be going to the spring playoffs, you only have to get top 4 to guarantee yourself double elimination. So the stakes are pretty low right now for FlyQuest, and they may not be, you know, practicing as hard or playing as hard as they could be. It'd be very hard to knock them out of the top 4, considering they are 11-2 currently. And the remaining schedule is Team Liquid, Immortals, C9, GG, and TSM. They basically can win a couple of those games and guarantee themselves top 4.
Right, what we're pivoting into now.
I would like to take a quick break, and then we can talk about LPL and LCK. That would be wonderful. All right, guys, sorry about that quick break, but we're back now, and we've got to talk once more about our delightful sponsor, FreezePipe. First off, thank you very much to FreezePipe for sponsoring us. We really appreciate it. And as you guys know, one of the best ways to support us is to support our sponsors. So if you're looking for a new piece of glass to assist you in your celebration of 420, which is coming up in about a month's time, now's a nice chance to upgrade what you've got already. Or if you're first time, an enjoyable experience, of course, with FreezePipe. They have bongs, dab rigs, bubblers, pipes. They've got it all over there. And each piece does contain a glycerin chamber that you can remove very conveniently, so you don't have to put the whole thing in your freezer. Take that glycerin chamber, perfectly safe, by the way. Glycerin used in a variety of foods. It's just there so it can actually freeze faster. Throw it in your freezer for an hour, and then it will cool the smoke and make you have a much more enjoyable smoking experience, guys. So thank you very much to the FreezePipe. You can head on over to www.thefreezepipe.com and use the promo code LFN for 10% off your order. So do not forget to use that promo code LFN. It's easy. It stands for Last Free Nation. You know that, guys. So thank you very much to FreezePipe for their sponsorship. Very much.
Oh, is that where you just went now? You just went to pop the glycerin chamber in the freezer so that by the time this show's ended in a mere hour, then you'll be able to smoke and get a cooler smoking experience, right? Okay, that's cool. Good. Glad to know.
Usually I save that for LCS days, Thorin, because that's the way that it actually makes LCS fun to watch. So if you guys have been struggling watching LCS, get yourself a FreezePipe. That's my advice. That's my advice right there.
I mean, here's the cool thing. Because it only takes 1 hour to cool the glycerin chamber down. That means if you were to go and watch from the beginning to the end, the classic TSM versus Evil Geniuses series in summer playoffs last year, which actually was one of the series where Danny already wanted to quit because it lasted 8 hours. If you were to put the FreezePipe chamber in at the beginning of the match, after game 1 or so, you could take it out. Then you could even do it 2 more times for your entire 8 or 9 hour smoking session. So there you go. Obviously, be responsible.
Yeah, I did. When it was talked about with Danny as it being, the TSM versus EG best of 5 is the thing that kind of pushed him over the edge because it was already
8 hours, mate.
It was 8 hours. That was also, guys, the day that I tweeted, because as soon as the pauses began, remember, I started watching game 1. The pauses began. I was like, I can't deal with this. I'll watch this later. I literally went to the butcher, got ribs, smoked pork ribs for 5 hours, ate them. And then the series wasn't over yet. That's how long that series took. It must be just an absolute nightmare to play these series as a player with these insane delays, because at least we can just give up on the series and be like, okay, I'm going to watch the VODs because it's going to compress the time frame down to like 3 hours instead. Feel sorry for the players. Feel sorry for the
Exactly.
players.
So the beauty is you're eating smoked ribs, watching Bjergsen get smoked, and then after that you smoked wheat. So there we go. The trifecta, you got all of them. You did it all. You got all the smoke,
The complete experience. The complete experience.
Yes, exactly. I think we should rename our show to that. All the smoke. We're going to call it. Monte and Thorin present all the smoke. Patented TM. I don't think there's anyone else conflict of the interest in the industry. No.
I think it's totally fine. Okay.
Should we do LCK then? Because I've got another angle on this. I've come with some homework as well. I say homework. Okay. I read Reddit and found some interesting details for you. I don't know if you saw this thread, because obviously one of the really weird things about this LCK split, if you're a fan who hasn't been following LCK, is obviously the big hype off-season move for Damwon was bringing in Deft, who's just won Worlds. And you look at the team, like spoiler, at the point in Deft's career he's at now, he was never going to be the Uzi super resource carry anyway. So if anything, you even think that's actually a great upgrade, isn't it? Like Doktiam was a little bit underwhelming or just average. You bring in Deft, he just has to basically be a better Doktiam, right? Well, even though in the team, actual Damwon D+ now hasn't done very well this split, they've only sort of got it back together now by scooping all the wins off the little shitter teams that they're supposed to be. So the record looks fine, but they are a bit sus for that record. But the weirdest thing of all is, it's not Deft who's at all playing badly, guys. Like, I actually saw there was a Reddit thread. He's number one in every single category, Monty. He's number one in like KDA, CS per minute. This is like a week ago or 3 days ago. He's number one in KDA, CS per minute, damage per minute, kill share, gold share, least deaths. He is second in gold per minute and only behind Gumayushi. Like, mate, what's going on in that sense? Because that means essentially individually, Deft's actually having a pearl of a split. It just seems it doesn't interface with the rest of the team somehow. What's the issue?
So yeah, I think first off, I do think Dplus has found their groove again. After we talked about Showmaker a couple weeks ago, struggling and openly saying basically that he's burnt out, and it did appear that he was in fact burnt out. I don't know if just saying it publicly has remotivated him or there are other factors, but he looks a lot better. So to the Deft point, if we rewind to the start of the split, a lot of Dplus's wins were carried by Deft and Kellen playing Lucian and Nami, and they're now 8-0 this split in games where they get Lucian Nami. Now, it was given to them a lot more at the start of the split, so that powered up some of their early victories, and people started eventually taking it away from them. So that also, because they were playing so heavily through that bot side, really did inflate a lot of the stats that we associate with Deft. Not to say he hasn't been good, guys, because he's been great. And then what happened was later on, their troubles a lot of the time weren't that they were playing early games badly. In fact, oftentimes they would be ahead or doing just fine. And then we'd get to a stage in the game where Showmaker would be split pushing and he would just die. And then the other team would get Baron and then they would lose the game very suddenly. So there were a lot of kind of careless macro mistakes that Dplus was making, or Kana would be having a bad game. And Kana, I think, has taken a lot longer than most people would have anticipated for a veteran player to integrate into this roster, but he looks a lot better recently. But honestly, a lot of this has just been a slight meta shift because Canyon being able to play Lee Sin, Nidalee, Elise, Viego now again, these early game ganking junglers has really empowered Dplus in many ways. Showmaker not making the same mistakes anymore, as well as Showmaker being able to show off the depth of his champion pool and playing a few less orthodox picks, or I suppose we should say reviving them from last year. Bringing the Lissandra back, the classic LeBlanc counter was a great move. It was an excellent Lissandra composition that they played in the second game versus Hanwha Life. So I think all of these factors are powering up this team. Their drafts have also gotten better. I mean, they allowed Hanwha Life in game 1 of their series to have the Caitlyn, and their answer was when they saw that the Karma was banned, they banned the Lux, which makes it safe for Deft to play Jinx, which is certainly a fringe meta AD carry pick, without threat. And we didn't really know that Kellen was going to be playing Kalista. Like, that's not that hasn't been Kellen's style to play a lot of these supportive AD carries. He's played it like only one other game on Kalista so far this split, and the emphasis really has been on enchanters for Kellen overall. So by bringing that in, you did throw a little curveball that you wouldn't necessarily expect Dplus to use. And then, Showmaker's been able to play like Lissandra and Annie mid lanes, where he can provide a lot more of the support and crowd control and open up things for the rest of the squad. So I think Dplus looks really good right now. I think arguably they're the second best team in Korea as it stands after this week.
I mean, obviously Gen.G's fallen a little bit, sure. I mean, the other thing I would say, this is what I want to bring it back to, though, is like, dude, unironically, we're right now the moment that you would take in the time machine and show the fan in 2013. You'd go, Deft and Faker, they're both really amazing 10 years from now, mate, for real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're both having banger fucking rollback splits. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sign for the game. Obviously, that they've been able to have this longevity. It makes it so you get such amazing storylines like we had in the World Finals last year, and you get such amazing storylines like we have, in the LCK.
Well, it would be cool if they play in the final this playoffs, wouldn't it?
Oh,
That'd be an awesome fucking matchup.
Oh, I'm sure that would be crazy. And, we're going to get T1 versus Dplus in the last week of the split as well. So that rematch, and the first T1 versus Dplus is still my favorite. It was still my favorite series that's been played this year.
Yes.
That happened in week 2. We're now just finishing week 7, and we've seen other good matchups, but the level of research that went into that game, they really did a good job of like scouting each other, trying to deny each other power picks. It was insanely close, best of 3, just very, very pleasurable to watch overall. And I mean, the Gen.G T1 was also good, but not as good as Dplus versus T1. And so if Dplus can maintain this form and the depth of their champion pool, it looks like they found a way to really power through, because the thing with Dplus is they are approaching the point where it's very difficult to ban them out. And like Kana's Renekton is undefeated. Their Lucian Nami is undefeated. Right. We have Canyon's Lee Sin. So there are all these picks that maybe aren't the power picks that you're seeing. Like usually the bans that we're seeing most commonly are things like Varus, right? Ash.
A lot of bot lane shit. A lot of bot lane stuff. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of bot lane shit. I mean, if you go back to KT versus Live Sandbox, we're now reaching games where there are eight AD carry bans in a single game, which is just crazy,
it's
right?
Mad, isn't it?
But Sejuani, Annie, Caitlyn, Ash, these are all very high priority bans within Korea right now. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely working out, because you can also it's not like Dplus can't play Caitlyn. You know what I mean? Like they're still a good Caitlyn team. So they actually have a depth.
Come on.
Oh yeah. They have a depth that is really, really quite good right now, and that you like to see. So I'm now that Showmaker looks like he's a little bit back in form, I am much more high on Dplus than I was. In Canyon, a lot of his issues were overextending on like champions like Sejuani, whereas now that he can flex and play some of these early game junglers and all in more effectively, we're seeing him be a lot more potent on the map early, and the rest of the team is able to carry through into the late game.
I saw actually a very interesting Reddit thread, Monty, where it was someone had translated some content that Wolf, T1 Wolf, joke is not the one who's on Monty's show, obviously the real former T1 who works now with the team, obviously. He had a theory he espoused about how draft works in LCK at the moment, because it's so centered around what bot lane picks you have and what you ban. I thought it was just very interesting. I thought I'd bring a little bit of it up and see what you thought. So basically, this is the section I want to read out, right? Is when he explains the difference between how the top teams in the LCK and how the lower teams draft. He explains it like this. He says that if Lucian, Zeri, and Caitlyn are the strong team's treasures, as in the ones that they want the most because they're going to carry the game, then the weak team's treasures are Varus, Ezreal, and Jhin. And he says weak teams have no choice but to play these champions because they can't trade Lucian or Zeri with a stronger opponent. If they try, they always lose, which does seem to check out. Then he says ADC Jhin actually has a decent win rate on weak teams, but tends to have a bad win rate on strong teams. What do you think about that angle, by the way? Because I thought it was a very interesting perspective. Like, obviously, it's not the same that teams are all just going for the same picks, right? It does seem like there's a bit of a distinction. Because, like Ezreal, I have noticed some of the small teams, you can sort of steal a win on that sometimes if you have the right comp.
Yeah, I think probably the teams that are within playoffs that are most guilty of that are KT and Live Sandbox.
Yep, KT especially is all about Ezreal in it.
Yeah, although they do very well on the Zeri also. But aiming is just more like the thing about the way KT operates and what we've seen in the past couple of weeks is that the karma ban or first picking karma, which is what Dplus did when we saw that series against KT, and I think was very effective in that, because you wouldn't think that first pick blue side karma would be super good in the current meta. Like, it's certainly not bad, but you wouldn't say, okay, that's the high priority pick. But it turns out if you take that pick away from KT, it really just serves as KT's crutch to get through laning phase with a champion like Ezreal. Also counteracts Caitlyn Lux so that they can kind of like get away with leaving the Caitlyn up sometimes. And which we also saw, by the way, when they played Live Sandbox, like they literally just played the Karma Ezreal, which is the traditional kind of counter lane to Caitlyn Lux, because you can counteract the push that Caitlyn Lux give you and then scale better into the late game. But KT has been trying to figure out ways not to get shoved in early on, right? That's been their main thing, and Karma really does provide them relief. Now, Live Sandbox also to a lesser degree, because it's not that Envy or aiming are bad AD carries. It's just that maybe they don't have the strongest early game pressure or laning phase, or as a team, their macro isn't good enough. So I think what Wolf is trying to imply here is that these picks can be crutches because they paper over potential weaknesses in early game jungling and objective control that provide opportunities to take things like Drake's or get kills in lane or push up. Like, the thing with having these pushing lanes is you have to cover for them very effectively as well as a jungler. Otherwise, they end up being vulnerable. So I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about the teams this way. I think KT is a team that likes to scale very much, and we've seen what happens with very good players like aiming and BDD really popped off this week as well. When that happens, I mean, KT did beat Gen.G this week, and they beat them very legitimately as well.
Oh, had some very good players in that game, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially the third game where we saw the last pick Twisted Fate, and they basically, really punished Chovy for blinding the Akali. I mean, I think Gen.G had a pretty bad draft in game number 3, and KT developed a comp that was going to be able to basically lock down Chovy. Chovy didn't have a chance to play that game, which is a very good strat, turns out, against Gen.G to lock down Chovy. So I do think Wolf's take is interesting.
Do you have concerns about Gen.G, by the way? Because obviously there's only a couple of weeks left. Like, it's looking a little bit sus. Like, the problem is their sweet spot was about, like 2-3 weeks ago now? They were really looking fucking sick then.
I think in a best of 5, they're probably going to be okay. My main concern with Gen.G is their drafts at times, because I don't know if they're giving their players the very best chance to win the game. And it's things like blind picking that Akali in game number 3 that put me a little bit on edge about them, because it's not like BDD hasn't played Twisted Fate.
Oh, of course.
He's played Twisted Fate this split, right? He's got 3 games on Twisted Fate. He's now 3-0 on the champion. And he is a renowned Twisted Fate player in terms of his career. And if you give KT some of their best champions, such as, Keen being on the Renekton, although Keen's Jax has been one of their big picks this split, I think KT really did outdraft Gen.G in that final game, and it made it very, very hard for Gen.G to win.
Because obviously the hype angle is there's a world now, if Gen.G is not going to lock that second spot in, dude, if the table goes the wrong way, they might have to just play KT in the playoffs. That would be the banger, right? I'd like to see a best of 5 between those 2 teams.
Yeah, and I think also with KT, they're a good matchup into Gen.G, because KT has to squeak by in the laning phase. So much of their power has been around team fighting and like getting Zeri or Ezreal or Jax into the late game where they can really dominate. And once they get to that point, like, they're looking really good. Or the Sejuani, for example, like that's been one of the most important picks for KT as a whole. So Gen.G, who likes to play a macro game first and foremost, and maybe doesn't have, Peanut isn't the Peanut from several years ago that's dominating everybody on Lee Sin like he used to. They're more of a cerebral, slow, win by incremental advantages team. And I think
that's actually perfect if you're KT and you want to scale up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's
right.
a bad matchup.
I see what you mean. Yes.
I think it's a bad matchup for Gen.G. Whereas if you pick more early game compositions against Gen.G, they can kind of batten down the hatches and hold the fort long enough for those incremental advantages and their farming advantages to come online. But when you're playing against KT that just likes giga scaling compositions, that can be more challenging to actually execute on. So in a way, like, you know, KT, I think Gen.G matches up well into a team like T1 because they are able, you know, it's not like Gen.G is dying a lot in the laning phase. They actually do have strong laning. But they're not playing a lot of early game champs, is my point. Or like, Gen.G is not the tower diving team. That's T1, right? T1's the team that's going to play these early game compositions and generate massive snowballs, which is very punishing against KT. We've seen that recently. So I think that T1 matches up very well into KT, and KT matches up very well into Gen.G.
Also, by the way, I actually do think that this is going to be an example of a playoffs where, although to be fair, people do forget there is a different format. Remember, LCK isn't the fucking gauntlet anymore, guys. So they don't really have to like go from like KT doesn't have to beat everyone at the moment in the playoffs. But to me, it's like the order of the playoffs because there's the loser bracket. It's going to be so interesting because like there's a whole bunch of matchups where it's just literally who the teams are, how good the game's going to be. Like for example, obviously we already know if Hanwha plays T1, they're the only team that's beating them. If KT plays Gen.G, it's probably the right matchup. Whereas if, like, for example, KT just plays against fucking, like, Dplus, you'll probably just lose, you know? Like, in that scenario, like, I think this playoffs is going to be really interesting, mate. Because there's so many narratives to play with.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the 3rd through 6th seeds are all playing each other, and the winners of that play the top 2 seeds. And only the top 4 teams are double elimination.
Yes. So think about what I just said. Right now, you really would have like Gen.G against KT potentially, like as the first round matchup. And then if you're Gen.G and you get bounced, then forget low bracket. You don't get a low bracket at that point, right? That's when you get boosted. Yeah. So if you're Gen.G, it's actually super big that you try and close and get 2nd place. That's fucking really big.
Yeah, it's really big, but also even having 3rd place is really big because it allows you to select your opponent from the 5th and 6th seeds. So you get to pick between 5 or 6, depending on which one you want to take. And because all of these teams match up very differently, I think what's exciting about the LCK right now is that it's exactly what you want it to be, which is that you have basically 6 teams that are a cut above the bottom 4 teams. So you have a very hard line between playoff teams and non-playoff teams. So there's not really a shitter that's going to like escape into the playoffs. It's like you have very clear delineation, which means that, yeah, the rest of this split may not be super exciting, although jockeying for position, as we said, is very important. But the playoffs should be really good. I don't think I think Live Sandbox is really like a
They're
cut
probably
below.
The fraud. They're the imposter, obviously. Yes, exactly.
They're a cut below the other 5 teams at the moment, although Hanwha might be in that position as well.
No one knows
because
on that one.
Hanwha's currently engaged in actually playing all of the rest of the playoff teams because they, on the 2nd round robin, they got mega boosted by playing the bottom 4 teams all in a row. And then when they hit Dplus, they got roasted this last week, and they literally played the other 4 playoff teams to end their split. So they have a very hard run, and they may be entirely exposed during this period. But at least for now, they do seem like they're better than Live Sandbox. So point is that the seeding is going to be incredibly important. Now, it's almost impossible to dethrone T1 from the number 1 seed at this point in time because they're
not least because they'd have to lose every single game as well.
They're 3 games up, and like even if they win just 1 more series, like Dplus would have to win all 4 and then overtake them in map differential as well. So it's basically impossible for T1 not to be the number 1 seed.
I'll just throw this out there. T1's next game's against DRX. So that's already, mark that one down. That's a tick. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you hope for things, they're not losing that one.
Yeah, he's definitely about to put Beryl in the dumpster. Like, there is no.
And then also their last game at the end of the split, which will ensure that they make number 1, is against Nongshim. So I feel like it's in. We've already got that one. We sorted that one out. You're right. That's one safe. It's all good.
Exactly.
And by the
So
way, I'll
even
tell you what I'm looking for there. A classic angle where when they have secured number one and they play Nongshim in the last match, prepare for shenanigans because
Oh, yes, for
there's
sure.
surely no way you're playing a real draft there. You are absolutely doing some like crazy fucking comp or playing a troll champion or so, maybe they're just going to fucking like play out every troll every game. So who knows? Who knows, right?
So I will say, Thorin, as much as I hate these league formats with meaningless games, when the Koreans do it and when you see
They do
really
it in
good
style,
teams,
yes.
when you see really good teams with meaningless games against like absolute shitters, it can be very entertaining. It can be super, super fun because those games are entirely used to start sowing doubts into your opponent's mind before playoffs. Because you're right, Thorin, what they will absolutely do is they're going to debut some wacky ass pick.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is they're going to smash Nongshim with it. And then other teams, because it's their last game before playoffs, then the other team's going to be like, do we have to be worried about this? Like, is it actually good or is Nongshim just garbage? Like, and so there's so many mind games that go into this that are delightful to talk about for playoffs as well. So sometimes it can be entertaining to have these meaningless games. Sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
Especially, I will also say, especially when it doesn't affect the rest of the league.
That's the most important thing because like the Nongshim angle doesn't matter, and at this point, like there'll only be one match even left to play the whole league. Yeah, exactly. As long as it doesn't violate competitive integrity, have fun. Let's do a crazy custom one-off draft. Why not?
Yeah. So yeah, I do think like that match in particular, because T1 is overwhelmingly likely
I'm
to
going to
have
say,
already
here's what you
locked in the
do.
first seed.
Here's what you do. I don't give a fuck. They won't do this, but here's what I would do. Right, here's what you should obviously do. On the last game of that series, could be game 2, obviously, you just draft the season 3 SKT skins.
Yeah, just run it back from All Stars.
Why not?
Run it back
have like a fucking Zyra and everything. Yeah, all that shit, whatever it was.
Zed comes out. Yeah. Why not?
That would be hilarious because the joke is almost none of that shit's in the meta anymore. Like, it would actually be a terrible comp.
Maybe. I mean, if you remember how they got the Zed in 2014 was they baited out the Cassidy pick. I feel like if you bait out the Aurelion Soul pick, maybe Zed is good.
Oh,
is good
could
enough.
be plausible then. Okay. All right.
Maybe you bait out the Aurelion Soul pick and then try and play Zed into it. I feel like that like I don't know. I don't think it's good, but at least it might be workable. It might be workable. But yeah. So I think we're coming up. The next week in LCK actually doesn't have too many hype matches. Like basically you want to track Hanwha Life because they play both T1 and KT, and we get the rematch of the only loss that T1 has had this season with like a million asterisks behind it because I don't think they were really playing very seriously against Hanwha Life the first time around. If you look at their champion selections and drafts, it's very unlike what we've seen from T1. And they even said afterward that they had not prepared very heavily and didn't seem to be taking that match particularly seriously. I think that will probably change because basically if T1 beats DRX and then by the time they play Hanwha later in the week, that is the game where they could lock up the number 1 seed. So they might actually play that very seriously.
Yeah. And they want revenge on Hanwha for the earlier loss, etc. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That way it causes like a very low stress final week of the season because it doesn't matter whether they win or lose.
Also remember, to be fair, if you're T1, you also actually, in theory, if you play people like Hanwha, would actually humiliate them because what you want to do is potentially influence the 3rd seed to pick differently for that 5-6 match. So if you can fuck with them at all, do that too. You know?
Yeah, sure.
Make all these teams look really bad, then it's hard to know who do I pick?
Yep. And then other than that, I think it's Gen.G Live Sandbox, although the more we see of
if Live Sandbox wins this game, Monty, it's going to ruin all the Gen.G narratives, though. Please, I hope they don't win that game. So, because they are not a good team, they are not. That's not legit. But Gen.G actually looked at one point like they were really legit. So please don't win that game. I'll be so sad, not least because the second they lose that game, every Chovy hater will just appear on Reddit, just out of smoke with all the same shit they've been saying for 5 years. Mate, it'll be too much for me to handle. I can't do it.
I mean, at least with Gen.G, we're starting to see some different stuff. Like we did see Cassante mid from Chovy into the Gragas. Gragas
you can always rely on Chovy, one of the greatest farming players of all time, to play stupid stuff like tanks mid and whatnot. Yeah, why not Bruises? Why not? It's classic throwback Chovy. Chovy shenanigans.
I mean, it worked. It worked extremely well.
True.
It worked extremely well, and we're starting to see players now respond to the Gragas mid now that the power of the Gragas mid has been shown. I don't think that
which is also some
Rion did-
2013 meta, by the way. Defton and Faker have obviously summoned the ghosts of 2013 to come back, so the meta's even back. Like we're playing fucking Zax in the meta.
Oh,
like,
you're not gonna like what's coming next then, because now what's been happening, by the way, is that a bunch of Korean ADCs are playing Cho'Gath ADC in Korean solo queue.
Oh Lord. My Lord, my Lord.
Like if you
Here's
look
the sad
at
thing about that, though. If you think about it, Monty, it's like I said about that point where if people only ever knew Zyra was a support champion, you're not going to realize how insane that ult is when you're the mid lane Zyra. Dude, imagine like a fed ADC Cho'Gath doing that fucking ult, etc., mate. Like that could get really out of control, I can imagine, if you can scale it up.
I mean, Deft is also playing Veigar as an ADC.
How is that an ADC champion?
I look, man, the hard engage and skirmishing in the bot lane has, continues to be a very interesting like addition to the meta.
Oh, it is.
And as we see a switch to more melee supports, it allows you to set up Cho'Gath's. So Cho'Gath was buffed recently. And it allows you to set up Cho'Gath's abilities, because it doesn't matter if you have a delayed knock up on Cho'Gath's Q, if there's a Nautilus or Leona just CCing them the whole time, right? And then you can close that gap. He has great lane sustain. You can push very effectively with Cho'Gath as well, and he's got great objective control because of his ultimate, right? You can't outsmite it. Like it becomes very easy to control bottom Drakes.
Oh, yes.
And, potentially with the future, here's another factor, with future jungle changes coming. So remember, they're reverting some of the gold changes and making it easier to play farming junglers. Well, guess what happens when that happens, guys? Maybe we see Graves or Kindred come back. So you can just play the Cho'Gath in the bot lane instead, and you just have your jungler play an AD carry. Why not? With Veigar also, he just provides, the cage is one of the best abilities in League of Legends because the zone control is crazy, extremely long zoning time around chokes and objectives. He could just one-shot. He scales very effectively. He can one-shot people later in the game. So there are a lot of potential bot lanes that could be useful and that pro players do appear to be playing in solo queue. Gumayusi is also, I'm looking at it right now, is also playing Veigar. He's also playing Cho'Gath. So it's coming. It's coming. And looks like Gumayusi was in a game with Faker, and Faker was playing mid lane Cassante while Gumayusi played bot lane Cho'Gath.
Also, by the way, one thing I've realized is actually mad base, but no one picks up on it, Monty. Right? Sadly, this was mainly actually the era when you were in Overwatch and you were mainly pivoted to that game and you were doing very little league content. But that was the era when they did that dreaded Orwellian renaming of ADC to
to bot
marksman.
laner.
No, they called it marksman
right.
initially.
Yeah,
they called it. That's the thing, Monty. They call it bot laner now, and you know why I think that is.
They've called the position bot laner. They call the champion class marksman.
Oh, right, that was it, because that was that's why it never worked though, Monty. That's what I was going to bring up. Have you noticed how no one says marksman anymore? Because what you might not remember is during the time when you were in Overwatch, a lot of people in leagues, esports, like in articles, would just start saying marksman instead of ADC, right? Well, the best part is it already was a garbage term anyway, because it doesn't make any sense that like marksman, like for example, how's Lucian a marksman? Do you know what I mean? Like nothing about his champion is like accuracy, like he's not an archer or something. Like for Archie it makes sense. For Lucian, for Caitlyn it maybe makes sense. For some of the other ones it makes no sense. But it makes even less sense in the modern day when there's been mages playing in the bot lane and now fucking this shit and all the ADC champions, the bloody support. Like that just shows why Riot just stay out of all the position names, please. You didn't even acknowledge there was a meta, so don't tell me what the champion class is. Like, come on, bro.
What's going to be annoying about Cho'Gath too, Thorin, is like he's actually a flex pick because he's like fringe top laner in the tanks right now. Like we've seen it as like a Scion counter pick also.
Sure.
And you know what? This also may enable Vayne picks in the bot side. I don't know, man. Like bot lane's going to get fucking crazy for playoffs. We're definitely going to see these champions come out, I think.
Yeah, listen, I have always thought Vayne was a really fun champion. Like it's just like one of those ones where I actually think in the modern day, because of all the fucking like damage creep and fucking mobility creep, it's not that viable now, but like that was probably one of the best made champions in League of Legends, in my opinion. It's like it's the best example of the one where for ADC it takes mad skill to actually get all that damage off. So I've always loved it. I don't necessarily love when some of those LPL fuckers play it as like a like play. I saw one where like some guy played it into fucking Ziggs, like, and he did that out of choice. Like, what the fuck? But okay, so hopefully it's more responsible than that, at least.
Yeah, I also think like it could potentially be flexed mid as well. Like you're not going to convince me there's a world where Faker will play Gragas mid where they won't play like Cho'Gath Viego. You know what I mean? Like the Cho'Gath gets the silence, then you get the a Viego stun into a knockup, and then you just devour him. Right. And the thing about Devour too is it synergizes really well with Viego because once you get that first kill, the Viego snowball starts where he just hops from corpse to corpse. So I don't know. I think this is legit. I think this is actually just very legit. And I think we're definitely going to see it. I think we will definitely see it.
By the way, speaking of regions that are going to have straight fire playoffs, we should talk about the LPL. Because, mate, obviously there's still a while to go. It's the LPL, so you play like fully like 16 best of 3 series each. But like, guys, if you haven't seen the LPL, here's the reason why it's going to be fucking amazing. Because the monster rosters aren't even the ones at the top of the league. It's actually some surprise teams that are leading the league. And so there's so much uncertainty about who even is actually the real best team. Like, a lot of us think it's JDG. Some people thought it was top. Like, no one was saying beforehand, oh, it's going to be fucking EDG or like, no,
EDG
no one thought
might
LNG.
be the best team, no joke.
EDG looks right now like well-rounded. Look who they've beaten. So the key thing is, if you remember the way the playoffs work in the LPL, guys, it's like LCK. The first round you just get straight eliminated, but then the dream, just like LCK, is you want to get to that top 4, don't you? Because then you get the double elim portion. Well, luckily, if you look at the teams we have right now, as long as the big names like JDG and Top don't lose their series, the top 4 is going to be fucking fire. It looks actually amazing. Because as you say, like the LNG one shocked a lot of people because basically, like, spoiler, like from what I've seen of the LPL, I would vote Scout the MVP of the whole LPL, mate. I think he's fucking so cracked right now. And by the way, amazing. I said this as soon as I started watching LNG. I think his ADC is a mad liability. I'm actually amazed that team's able to do what they can. But you look at the rest of the team, like, as you say, if you actually were to pick right now, take aside all hype and all the things I think about Knight or take everything up, take all the nameplates off. You're right. EDG would be the number 1 team right now. They'd have to be. They're just the most well-rounded team. They won the big scalps.
They're the best macro.
They should be number 1. Yeah. And as I said on Twitter, mate, what a fucking amazing job EDG's done over the years, hiring, coaching staff, rebuilding teams. Dude, they've lost all their star players over the years. Remember, they went from like, they had fucking Nami to Deft to then they had the Scout era to now they don't even have Scout. If people don't know, the guy they have now, 4-4, is the guy who was like an LMS champion. Then he came over. He was on like, I think one of those like early LPL teams that was like a bit whack. Like maybe, I can't remember which one it was. It was like a mid-table team. He didn't do that well, but then he's gradually gotten back into individual form last year or so. He actually looks legit on this team, mate. What a great job in general that org's done, mate. To constantly pivot like that is so hard. So I'm so impressed when people were able to just rise to the top. And this is, remember, arguably the most difficult league to go to the top of. It's so fucking stacked with skill. Like, there really are players in bottom half table teams where they have like one player who's like fucking world class at their position. Like, it's such a hard league to be good in. So I think in mad respect to EDG, whoever built that roster, for a great job. I didn't expect that when I saw that on paper. I would have thought they'd be like the 6th best team, you know?
Yeah, I do think that the LPL is pretty top heavy at the moment. Like there's a pretty high concentration of like super teams.
There's some definite frauds in the playoffs as well, mate.
Yeah, Weibo as well. So we're gonna see some bad teams in the playoffs. Like that's not even really a question. But I think the top 6 overall, top 5 are definitely good. I mean, the top 4 are going to be very good. The top 6 are going to be pretty damn good.
I forgot to mention they also lost fucking Viper from EDG as well. That's not exactly like nothing. That was like considered the best player in the world.
Now, I think we probably could make an argument that if Scout had remained on EDG, this team is better.
They'd be even better. Come on.
Yeah, they would be even better. I don't know if that's a particularly hot take at the moment.
No, I think it's reasonable as fuck.
I mean, yeah, especially if you even though JJ has been doing well, I think you slot Tarzan and Scout into this roster. And this becomes instantly the best, the definitively the best team in the LPL.
Yes.
But EDG has done an amazing job, and not a lot of people have been talking about this. But I think Leave and Pays. We talked about this on Power Spike. Like Dom agrees, Leave and Pays are both incredibly high potential rookie players, and Leave has been such a delightful surprise within this EDG roster. And you couple that with Ale, who is on LNG. I wish Ale was still on LNG in many ways because he's more of a a carry top laner than Zika is, who's been playing more, I think, of a weak side role for this team. Although Zika has been getting some good flanks, and I think generally has some pretty good positioning to set up team fights. EDG with Ale, with JJ and Fofo have been very good, and then Leave has vastly overperformed expectations. So EDG, I think, has the best macro of any team in the LPL right now. They're 9-2, and they've also played, basically all of the hard teams at this point in time. Their schedule, their remaining schedule is LGD, Anyone's Legend, OMG, FBX, and Thunder Talk. And OMG and Thunder Talk are basically, kind of upper mid-table teams, but those are their toughest opponents remaining. They've already run the gauntlet. They've already beaten the top teams.
Yep.
Now, as of this recording, we're recording this in the morning after it happened, so I haven't seen the Weibo games yet from EDG, and I haven't seen LNG 2-0 top esports, which is obviously a huge win for LNG.
That's enormous.
Because if you guys have been watching my power rankings on this channel, the problem with LNG was that they basically were the Hanwha Life of LPL in terms of strength of schedule, where they had played all the garbage teams. And literally this week, they play both JDG and top esports. And these are the matches that we really needed to see in order to say, okay, is this team actually legit? Because you get your record really pumped up in the LPL because it's so top heavy, depending on the order in which you play teams. But they are coming off a very legit win versus EDG from last week. Or, I mean, the EDG had the legit win over LNG, which is why we thought, okay, are they frauds? But then they come in this week, beat top esports. So I haven't seen these games yet.
And remember,
the timing of this episode.
If people don't know, if people are getting lost on the rosters, Top Esports, remember, has fucking Rookie and Tian, like two of the best LPL players in years and years and years. So that's why you have to realize, even though LNG has all sorts of flaws, I'm with you on it. Like I said, I think the ADC's a fraud, top lane's just whatever, but their jungle mid is just so good. Scout is probably the MVP, and Tarzan is just really cracked again, guys. So like a lot of regions, if you have that two positions nailed, you can just work miracles in these leagues.
Yeah, so now we're going to start to see, I mean, now with the top win, I think almost certainly, unless the eye test is like super terrible in that game for top esports or for LNG, just like, I don't know, I mean, JDG losing to OMG, I didn't leave that series thinking that OMG was the better team.
No, of course not.
Like, OMG got insanely lucky in that best of three. So I think that when we think about LNG, we now have to start really moving them into the top 10 teams in the world because of this result. And because, as you say, I love watching LNG because I like watching Scout and Tarzan absolutely pop off. And Tarzan legitimately is probably one of the top 5 junglers in the world right now, especially when it comes to his early game pathing. Incredibly intelligent, very good synergy, and really good team fighting, and we've seen him absolutely carry games. So I'm very high on Tarzan and Scout right now. They are working miracles with this LNG roster where the side lanes are really nothing to write home about. And considering how stacked some of the rest of the teams in LPL are, it's remarkable that they've been able to cobble together this kind of record.
Oh, mate, if you were just to show people the lineups of LNG, Top, JDG, and Weibo, and you said of those 4, LNG's the number 1 out of those 4, no one would believe you. Because I wouldn't even believe it now if I looked at it on paper. Like, Weibo looks, what the fuck? Like, JDG, these are insane rosters. But yeah, this team is just better right now.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Again, their test versus JDG this week is going to be very crucial. And it's hard also to read into regular season LPL results because the playoffs teams really power up. And like, I think overall, many of the top LPL teams have been sloppier than the top LCK teams. But considering how many games they play and also how easy some of the victories come for these teams, it really is all about playoffs with LPL. That's where you can actually judge the strength of a lot of these teams, because LPL teams will just kind of, they don't mind taking a few L's here and there as long as they continue to get into the playoffs, and they clearly play a lot looser in the regular season than many of them do in the when it comes time for playoffs. So yeah, I love watching LNG. I love watching EDG. I think EDG is probably my favorite Chinese team to watch at the moment because they're the most complete roster and they have the best macro.
Also, more the Korean style. I figured they'd be up your alley, mate.
Yeah. I mean, we had this conversation on Power Spike, but I think Dom's absolutely right to say like OMG is like the most Chinese
They're
LPL
ridiculous.
team.
They're so
I mean, they're
ridiculous.
hilarious. Like they're to be fair, OMG
They are a
is
very entertaining
definitely
team to
very
watch.
entertaining.
Yes,
Like
if you want to
super
see like
entertaining.
a slap down, drag out fight, that's what you're going to get every time these guys fight. Yes,
I love OMG because they will always go in, and when they come up with strategies from behind. PP God is genuinely a very good shot caller. He finds angles that other players.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
guys want, just watch the game 3 between JDG and OMG, where you get to see PP God just win the game with a brilliant shot call at the end. So OMG definitely has a lot of strengths, but they are kind of a sloppy, it's like watching a bar fight. It's fun, it's fun, but it's not like we're going to give them points for technical brilliance. They can be very inventive in the moment. They're the guy who finds the improvised weapon in the bar fight that wins the fight.
Okay.
That's a good analogy for them, but they're not going to be the guy that has done 20 years of kung fu to perfect his craft on the top
Well, the
of a
analogy
mountain.
here, Monty, is in their case, as you say, in a bar fight, if you snap a pool table over your knee and everything, that's pretty good. You can stab someone. If you just come to a sword fight with a pool table keep snapping off, the guy with the guy with like the fencing thing will just carve you up. You'll never get close to him. He'll wreck you. Yeah, of course. If he has like a katana or something, you just don't, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's fun about OMG. They're not going to win this league, but they are a very entertaining team to watch. They do drag other teams down to their level occasionally. They do surprise people with the sucker punch to the back of the head. They do glass you when you're not looking. But I think when it comes to playoffs and teams are really well prepared and they're meeting OMG on a field of battle with a week of preparation for a best of 5, that's when this team just completely falls apart.
That's also, in my opinion, why actually the playoffs look so tantalizing. Not only is this the ultimate region where which part of the bracket you're in is going to be massively influential, but also when you go and look at like that, like part of the table where, as you say, you get down to like, dude, Weibo's in 5th. A team in 5th place has the Shy, Zhao Hu, like boys. Like, this is going to be such a banger playoffs. Like, the potential for upset runs and upset series is massive, I think. Like, this is going to be really, really exciting. Like, that's why what I'm loving, actually, when I think of the bigger picture of League, because obviously everyone else is still thinking about the splits because it's only LEC's finished. I'm always looking towards MSI because I know MSI has that straight fire format. Like, dude, if we can get, for real, the 2 best LPL and 2 best LCK teams to MSI, it's going to be one of the best international tournaments you've ever had in League of Legends history. It's going to be really fucking sick. And everyone's got double elim domestically now. It's actually so good, Monty. Think of all those years where we would, like, you would see a bracket that would look amazing, but it's like, there's one upset ruined the whole thing. I hate upsets when it's a single elim bracket. If it's double elim, go ahead. You can get your upset. Let's see if you're actually legit. I don't mind it, mate.
Yep. And I think if I had to pick 2 teams right now to represent LPL at MSI, bearing in mind, guys, we don't know what the patch is going to be. We're still a couple patches out from knowing what
Here's
MSI
my guess.
will end
You're going to
up.
say EDG and JDG.
Yep, that's it. Because the thing about JDG is that when they're on a form and they're dominating the early game, they snowball so fast, and you can see the individual player skill. And EDG is like the macro team that is more than the sum of their parts. So I think that this way you get the star power of JDG, whereas you get the more cohesive team play of EDG. Plus, I think it would be very exciting to introduce Leave to an international audience at this point in time. It seems like a really good time for that to happen in his career. And like also if Gen.G ends up going to MSI, seeing Pays versus Leave would be really fun as a battle of like the rising star rookie ADCs. So I think those would be fun matchups for me.
I also just really want to see T1 play JDG. I think that would just be, that's one of the most tantalizing matchups you could put together now.
Also, Gen.G playing JDG with Ruler versus Pays. I mean, there's a lot of great shit we could talk about with some of these matchups. So I think for both a team, like interesting different styles, quality of teams, and storylines for MSI, having T1, Gen.G, EDG, and JDG would probably be the most fun group of Asian teams that we could.
The only thing is, though, Monty, I have to say this because obviously there's not that many critiques we have of like LPL, etc. There is one critique I have, which is 10 playoff teams, really. 10. This is like some old LCS shit. No, that's so ridiculous, isn't it? 10 teams make the playoffs. Like, come on, bro. Because the problem is some of the bottom ones, they're really bad. They are. I mean, they're really bad.
the first 2 rounds of LPL playoffs are almost just not
No,
worth
who gives a
watching
shit?
at all.
I know. Like you said, basically the only reason to watch is for OMG will do a fiesta, and then I don't know, maybe like IG does some bullshit win or something like. That's about it though. You just wait. Yeah, basically it's like the sweet spot's the third round, obviously, but the second round's when it'll start to get vaguely interesting. Third round's when it just goes mental, and then the top 4. This is also remember top 4 is the double limb guys.
Double
That's
elimination.
going to be fucking bonkers this LPL because that could be one of the most stacked top 4s in a long time.
Yeah, it'll be really good. I mean, same thing with the LCK. I think both of the regions are
Oh, I'm
the
loving these
most
formats now,
competitive
yeah.
in the top 4. So the fact that we get double limb best of 5s in both
Yep.
China and Korea,
Oh, it's sick.
both the playoffs are just going to be fire in Asia. They're going to be
Yes.
really, really good. And then we get the awesome new MSI format that Riot has, and we'll get to the top 2 teams from each of these regions. So I'm super excited about how things are going to shape up. MSI in general, it's going to be a really fun playoff and a really fun first international tournament, and I couldn't be happier because we've never actually said that at this point in the year, because there's always something fucking it up. It was
Dude, this
MSI
has
having a
made
bad
spring
format.
matter. It actually
was
matters now.
Korea having, LCK having a bad playoff format. Now we've got, it feels like we finally it took way too long. Riot is incompetent. They could have done this at any time previously, but we finally have what feels like an epic end of the spring into MSI coming. We
Have you
finally
noticed how on these shows for the last year or so, I've been saying this line that, look, obviously I do think CSGO is a better game than League of Legends, but I actually think a lot of what people find appealing about CSGO esports is the tournaments. It's having good tournaments with sturdy formats and proper seeding. That's what makes for a really great viewer experience. So I have to say the same thing, Monty. Even though the joke is, like, if anything, people in League should be like, this game's been around too long, it's got a bit still. No, this has actually breathed new life into this year. This feels like actually it could be the best year of League of Legends. It feels awesome. That's what happens when you have a cool format. You have something to look forward to. Whereas with the bad formats, it's like it could still work out, but you need like almost the perfect Doctor Strange scenario of exactly these teams with these games. Otherwise, it's like you just fucking blue balled at the end, like, I never got the match I wanted. You know?
I mean, it's also the LEC format too, right? Now
I love it. Yeah.
Now, the LEC format also plays very nicely into MSI. We're going to get an entire new, basically tournament to go through for LEC, and nobody cares about LCS, so it doesn't matter. So,
by
great.
the way, let me think. I'm pretty sure that Upset actually joined Vitality during the last Best Damn League show, so I think we addressed that at the end of that. But what are your thoughts on this move, by the way?
We talked about it in the last SI because it was rumored at the time,
fair enough.
Beforehand. But we obviously knew it was happening because everybody behind the scenes knew it was happening. Really exciting. I think, but again, you say this about Vitality every time. It's like we get excited for a Vitality roster, and then it just ends up being really underwhelming. This year,
which is also totally
on.
To be fair, that is absolutely on point branding, though, Monty. If your team's going to be called Vitality, then every split you should have new life seeping through, and everyone's like, the potential for growth here, where it could go, and then it just withers on the vine, doesn't it? And at the end, it's like it's just done, isn't it?
I
like
really
when
want
Jesus
them to
went
be
around killing those fig trees. What was he doing that for? Right? Come on.
I really want this to be successful because I want Vitality as an org to be rewarded for all of the big swings that they are taking. I respect the fact that they are truly trying to be the best that they can be, and all of the roster moves they make sense. They make sense. And surely the team has to be good this time. Photon, what turned out to be an excellent pickup for them. Bo's been good when he hasn't had to, giga carry this team on picks that don't make sense because their bot lane's performing so badly. I love Kaiser as a player. I really hope that this is the move that translates into great success for Vitality, because we also need a second team that can compete with G2 and potentially do some damage on the world stage. And yes, it was fun, to see Mad Lions overperform based on expectations. Yes, it was fun to see SK start to make a rise up the rankings. But if we're going to be real, guys, these are not the teams that are going to do well on an international.
No, exactly.
Like, Vitality with this roster does have that opportunity. Maybe in the future, as some of these players improve on SK, or perhaps, rising star players like Exakick go to better teams. But ultimately, you want some really top-end veteran players to be attending these international events. And so hopefully Vitality gives Europe a really strong 1-2 punch with G2, because I legitimately believe that G2 is one of the best, top 10 best teams in the world right now.
Yeah, I have a
really
similar thought. Like, it's not just the whole angle of like, I like perks and upset and all, which is true. But the other reason why is I actually think it hurts the region of the current like parity of G2 way ahead. Mad Lions would never beat G2, by the way. Could play that fucking series a million times, you'd lose every time. So the second's a bit weak. And then SK, who look, if SK had come second and give G2 a great game, I'd be doing the talk about EDG. Like, wow, maybe this team is a legit team. They couldn't even get past Mad Lions because they got a bunch of rookies and they're not used to going that far. So logically, like you say, if you look into MSI, the dream is G2 goes, obviously, but then that Vitality turns out to be really good, and we send 2 really strong teams, and then now we're not talking about FlyQuest. It's like FlyQuest plus G2 plus up Vitality plus the LPL and LCK. That'll be a banger. That'll be an amazing
maybe
tournament.
C9 as well. Like, C9 is
Possible.
not terrible.
At least they have pop-off potential. I'll give them that. So the other thing for me as well with this move, another reason I love it is, even if I take aside the fact that I like consider like upset someone I'm friendly with and like all that jazz and perks, another reason why is people don't know. I'll have to rephrase it, because I think when I've tried this in the past, people didn't get the point. Right? When I go on and on about how like driven Upset is and how he's like a grinder who puts in mad hours of practice and how he has like a mindset of trying to like achieve excellence and aspire to be the best, you don't know how rare that is, guys. That is so fucking rare in Western players. It's why when I do know a person like a Forgiven behind the scenes of what they're like, I get super hyped, and you might think I go too far, because here's the problem. The thing I've always thought was whack about League of Legends is what you just said there, which is domestic results mean someone earns the spot to go international, but you know that they have like half the chance of the other guy. Like, I'll just say this right now. His entire career, I've known Reckless was never going to actually be better than Uzi and Deft and these like monster Viper, Ruler. He's never going to be better than them, not least because his style doesn't allow it. Like, he's playing a style where, spoiler, what were the best ever international runs from Reckless? It's when he had like fucking peak caps and peak expected. Like, come on, bro. Like, that's just that you have the godlike playmaker elsewhere in your team. Whereas if you look at someone like Upset, like, I think he already showed it. And look, he hasn't got to play that many worlds because he had that one he skipped out on, obviously. But like, you see this guy's mentality. This is like Forgiven, where I don't, those stories aren't a joke. Forgiven really thought he was better than the Korean ADCs. He just thought like either their support's better than mine, or like, you know, like they just have a fucking better coaching staff or they draft better or whatever. He never believed they were actually individually better than him. Here's the thing. I actually genuinely think, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, my speculation, I think Upset's one of those guys. I think if Upset goes against FaZe, Monty, FaZe isn't some legend. I think Upset would think we can beat him if we get the right matchup. Give me the right bot lane matchup and I'll win the lane. That's what I want from a Western player. I want the guy who actually thinks he has not only the punching power to do it, but he believes he can actually win the game. Fuck all these players that go to Worlds and interview, say the right thing, and behind the scenes, because you know they've just lost 2 weeks of scrims, they already know like, lol, there's no way we're beating like T1, and then they just fucking mentally collapse before the game even begins, and they just sort of play it out like, lol, no, I want the guy who actually believes like, fucking, we can do this shit, we can win this.
Yeah, I just don't want to see Mad Lions competing internationally again. Like, as good as Niski can be domestically, I'm just saying, like, what are we talking about here? Him going up against Faker and Chovy? Like, please no, please no. I think that when you have other strong mid jungle duos, because that's how Mad Lions has been successful so far this year. When we start talking about what happens with Owner and Faker, or, you know, if we get to JDG having Kanavi and Kanavi in the mid lane with Knight, like it really becomes much more difficult to see how Mad Lions is going to be able to win against these top teams.
Oh, it's going to get sad. I don't think people know. Especially because, remember, if there's one thing that's not coming out of any of these Asian regions, it's a weak mid laner. There's no weak mid laner that's going to be at MSI. You can fucking book that right now. So unfortunately, as you say, look, by the way, I'll give Niski total credit. In the West, he is one of the best mid laners. He actually had a very good split. He's nowhere near the level of the guys we're talking about. Like, think of the remember, even if like the surprise teams come Monty, so even if shockingly fucking KT made it somehow, BDD's a fucking pretty experienced player who's a world-class mage player. What if Scout made it? Scout would smash fucking Niski right now. What are we talking about? You know what I mean?
I mean, the Scout Tarzan combo, I think, would be an absolute nightmare for Mad Lions. But BDD also is really been very good.
Another throwback split. Yeah, exactly.
Recently.
Right back in form.
He's been really, really good recently. Yeah, I think it's tough. So I would much rather, and people will say, oh, but what about Perkz? Perkz, you guys are under, first off, Perkz has proven himself internationally on multiple occasions previously. And Perkz also, at least in summer of last year, was possibly the best player on his roster, and he can certainly level up for one of these international.
He also rises to the occasion, doesn't he? Dude, even on the Cloud9 that failed MSI, still had some games where he just won them the game. Like he's just a guy who rises to the occasion, yeah. Whereas unfortunately, Nisqy at the moment is the opposite. Nisqy's the guy who gets to the dance and then sort of trips over and knocks everyone's fucking drink in the punch bowl over, isn't he? That's what he does at the moment, isn't he?
He does that even in LEC. He will make an impressive play and then immediately send it right afterwards. And you just can't make those kind of mistakes when you're playing against super good mid laners. You can't give them an opportunity to get back into the game. So I don't know. I think the Vitality is really the hope, and Vitality with this roster, surely this is a team that could be a top 10 team in the world. It's not like the mid table of LPL and LCK is undefeatable. You know what I mean? Like the top 2 teams are probably very difficult to beat, but I think they can be in the mix with certain like 4th, 5th place LPL and LCK teams.
Yes. And by the way, here's the angle that people miss. Because you know the obvious thing everyone says when they look at this lineup, Monty, is like, yeah, but it doesn't solve the Kaiser problem, does it? Kaiser was having a lot of issues. Guys, right, Upset just had what looked like one of his best splits, while Hylissang in the same lane just chain-fed over and over again. I think he can handle Kaiser. Kaiser's not as bad as fucking Hylissang was, mate. And spoiler, I'm pretty sure he'll just give Kaiser... Remember, like, they're both German as well. I'm sure he'll just give him the old fucking clip around the ear and just get your shit together. The problem with Hylissang is this, because people know he was a great player, even teammates like give him that leeway and are sort of like, I'll figure it out himself, because you just think there's that will. Someone like Kaiser doesn't have that status. If you're Upset, you can come in and be like, look, we're going to play like this, follow my lead, do these things. Because there's another thing. There are different ADCs. I actually have an interview I just published now with Kobe, where Kobe himself sees himself as more someone who, he wants someone else to shot call things. He doesn't want to like demand everything himself. Upset is in that double lift vein, mate, where he'll just straight up tell you, like, this is what I need. This is what I need at this point. I'm not coming to this fucking Herald right now. I'm going to clear this wave and we're going to fight around me in 2 minutes. I want the guy to do that, mate. That'll solve a lot of your problems.
Yeah, and I also think as the meta shifts back into more melee supports, that will help Kaiser quite a bit.
Imagine also being Bo now. You can now gank for Photon, Perkz, or fucking Upset. Tell you what, I'll predict it right now. If Vitality works out how I think they will, Monty, Bo's going to be the fucking MVP of the next split. Because I think he could have been the MVP of this split. It's just that, like, you saw he was one of the people who clearly had to band-aid the whole fucking map. If he doesn't have to do that and he can just gank wherever he wants and he has potentially all 3 lanes could win, this guy's going to have a Smurf. I'll say that. I'll take him as the MVP because I think his potential's mad, that play. He looks so fucking dynamite, doesn't he?
Yeah, when he's on form, he's great. And I do agree that some of these Nidalee picks and some of the, the Karthus picks. Now, the question is...
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. We also need to see that guy at MSI. Please. Please. Come on. I need him against Tarzan and fucking Order. I need it. Because we actually win some of those matchups. It's not impossible.
Plus, I need the Bo owner boner matchup. I have to have it. Okay. The casting nightmare. By the way, somebody is definitely going to say boner on broadcast accidentally if those two match up against each other. It's inevitable. So I need that purely for hilarity reasons. Anyway, I think what we're talking about here is really good, and I do think Bo. My concern that I was about to say is that it seems like they lost control of the team heading into the group stage of LEC, because I don't really understand how you got to the point where you have to have these emergency Karthus like Hail Marys, especially when you almost win for game 1 of that series.
Oh, it's so stupid, wasn't it?
Yeah, that does make me concerned about the emotional state of the team, but one of the best ways to solve that is to have a new honeymoon period by swapping out one of your players. And if the players are confident that this is going to change because the bot lane was so much of a problem, like, I understand why the rest of the team would be tilted by what the bot lane was doing, especially if I was a player like Bo. So hopefully that resets the mental, resets the expectations within this team. They can come together and actually do well.
Yeah. See, here's the key thing. Vitality bot lane, like me with that free spec commercial, just need to learn a little bit more impulse control. Because the thing is, Monty, it's a bit like, you know, when I've had these rants where I go off on people in Twitch chat, I've now learned Twitch chat just is Reddit. It's like 3 people say all the dumb stuff, and all you have to do is remember the name. Don't look at the opinion. Once you see the name, you just don't ever waste another second read. I've even mastered now, when I see the name, even though my peripheral vision must be reading it, I tell my brain consciously not to read the comment, and I just flip past. So I've started doing it. It's all good. Because I've noticed there's the same 3 people in the chat just constantly go like, whatever that opinion is, your opinion is X, mine is not X. Wow, that is a fact. That is not a fact. It is. They just do that all day long. So it's like, you know what? Have at it, boys. Have at it. Have at it. Just have at it. Do we do some questions?
Yeah, we could do some questions now. It's a good time, as we've touched on. We actually touched on all 4 of the major.
By the way, just to run through the order in case people are wondering, if you're someone out there who supports our content or wants to support our content, in theory, this is the order of the best ways you can support us. The best, which, look, admittedly, in this particular case, it's not an extremely cheap item. The best would be buy what sponsors us, like the freeze pipe. Obviously, look, if you don't smoke cannabis or you just don't want it in a bong, fair enough, I get that one. Second in order would be the Discord subscription, which will get you access to these questions each week. Third would be things like sub to the channel, or even, by the way, even though they're free, at the bottom, we still will mention like the video or sub to the channel or put a comment on YouTube. That's the hierarchy, though, roughly, of how you can best help us.
Yep, exactly. So I would say, especially like Twitch Prime subs, considering it costs you guys nothing, that's a very good way to do it as well. So appreciate you guys who all have supported us and continue to support us. Okay, let's go. Though already impressive as it is, AI technology, I believe, will eventually replace most conventional jobs out there, if not all. Suppose humanity reaches a point where all the necessary work is delegated to the AIs, and things like agriculture and solar technology are fully automated to grant us true self-sufficiency. What kind of society do you envision such a world to be? A utopia or a dystopia? Sounds not great.
Here's the part that they never seem to get, Monty, that doesn't work. Look, I get sort of why people are tricked, because almost every single futuristic movie does like the old meme. You know that meme from like 10 years ago on the internet where it's like step 1, do something. Step 2, do another step. Step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Obviously, step 3 is always the most important one. Like, and then step 4 is like profit. It's like, you know, if you can just do whatever. Well, the joke is every single sci-fi movie skips past the question mark. Well, how did they implement like this AI technology and robots and make it all work and have no problem? But if you did, it'd be this perfect utopia. Spoiler, here's why there's a question mark, question mark, question mark that they don't address in the movie with the backstory. Because think about it, right, guys? When some massive corporation or wealthy businessman, industrial type figure makes more money and crushes the margins more, when does he ever pass the saving on to you? When does he ever give the profit to you? So this is what I don't get about this whole premise as to why people are into it, Monty. The obvious premise goes like this. The AIs and robots replace all our jobs, and then we're just homeless slaves who just are dependent on the state. We don't, by the way, enter Star Trek and suddenly not have to work and explore the arts and, you know, like proper child rearing and how like the heights of civil. No, here's the joke. That's always existed in history. That's called the aristocracy. They'll be in those super rich things at the top of the penthouse. You'll be the Blade Runner fuck on the bottom floor. Like, they might be doing that, but it won't be us. So I don't know why in this scenario everyone's so horny to be like, yeah, bring it all in, replace everything. Because why at the end would they go, now that I've replaced everything, you can just share in all the profit? Like, that's just never been the way society, as far as I can tell, has ever existed. So I'm mad skeptical of it personally. I don't want it. I want to be able to have a job and control my own money and move between work, etc. Like, it sounds great, but I like all utopian ideas. Like, there's a reason why people always point out the word utopia actually means no place. And if you ever go look up the guy who invented the premise of a utopia, he explicitly invented it as like an extreme caricature of what like a perfect society would be like, but one that obviously couldn't exist, basically. It was like a hypothetical concept. So I think people just get caught up in like the romance of those ideas. Whereas I think I use like a cynical lens of how people would apply that tech, you know. I don't think it's going to be for me and you, mate.
I also think that so first off, I don't think this is going to happen. I think the most likely outcome is that jobs just change to utilize AI, and
There'll
that
be a guy
AI,
using AI. Exactly.
a guy
Yes.
uses the AI. You know, that's what I think the
For
job
pennies.
actually becomes.
Yes.
At least in like the more immediate decades
Yes.
in the future. So I don't think we're actually replacing jobs with AI. I think AI just becomes another tool, just like robots have already become a tool in manufacturing. Um, I do think though that in this hypothetical future, we already have a problem with especially young men feeling really displaced, which has allowed a lot of this kind of like, I would say, questionable male empowerment to come in that dupes people, because I think a lot of young men feel as though they don't have a purpose and that they're not
Oh.
respected and they don't have value. And I think that taking away work, which gives a lot of men, including I speak this out of personal um, experience as well. I am very career driven. I really care about the job and the things that I'm doing in my life, and it gives me a very strong sense of purpose personally. And I think a lot of people, without a lot of men in particular, without a strong sense of worth from their jobs, will suffer. And I think that that will be a kind of negative mental health aspect to men in particular. Um, So I think there is I think that sounds very negative to me, and I think people do better when they have something to focus on and something to struggle against and feel like they're improving. And otherwise, you get like the Wall-E world, right, where there is no purpose to life anymore.
I mean, I'll go one further. I actually think we're already too many steps down the path that is dark on this exact topic, which is I actually think if you were to try and track the moment when a lot of things in societies just went to shit, it would actually be when people stopped working physical jobs and started working behind computer screens. Like one of the reasons why it's always men that are targeted in this sense is very logical, which is if you have a group of people who are disenfranchised and feel resentful and have a lot of energy to let out, young men of fighting age are going to be obviously be the most dangerous, because logically, if they haven't had fathers and any guidance, they might act out in like a antisocial manner. They might be violent. They might be sexually aggressive. There's all these obvious ways
Testosterone's
where,
a hell of a drug, guys. It makes you do really
sure.
stupid shit. And
No, but
so,
the point is, it can also be the fuel of all the great
yes,
shit you can do. So the point is, if
yes,
those people don't have an outlet, which the best thing in the past, as bad as manual labor might seem, it's a brilliant outlet for your body. And if people don't know, like I always say this, you know, when people look at like an English breakfast and it obviously looks like, fucking hell, if you ate that, I'd need a nap. No, because the guy who eats that food, Monty, he's like a farm laborer. That's the guy who goes out. He needs to eat like 4,000 calories because he's just working like 12 hours a day, lifting shit up, carrying, if you're on a construction site, carrying
right.
bricks up a fucking ladder, like that for 8 hours. Like these people, the joke is their job has like the output of like being a bodybuilder.
Oh, yeah.
Like that type of work, when you finish that job, you just go home, eat your food and go to sleep. You don't go out and have a fight with someone, be antisocial. Like it actually does take care of so many problems. People don't get it. Yeah, having an outlet for aggression and physical energy for young males, I think is really important.
I totally agree, and that's why sports are also good, right?
Yes.
And probably one of the reasons why society develops sports.
By
You
the way,
have to
even though
imagine.
people meme on it, it's why I actually do agree with Cloud9 and people like Jack when part of their system is that you have to exercise, you have to have activities. You
Yep.
can't just sit in your room on your own playing solo queue all day. I actually agree with that. I think it
I
is
agree with that
healthier
as
to have
well.
that lifestyle, you know. Although I'll say the side angle, which if you watch my episode with Kays on Reflections, which was funny, is of all the people as well, Monty, this is so perfectly cast. When Kays was in Origin, right, he tells a story about how one time Alfari and the performance director were in a screaming match at the top of their lungs because this performance director wanted, of all people, Alfari to come in for like morning yoga or something. And if you know Alfari, I mean, just told him to go shove it up his ass. Like, he didn't give a fuck. Like, I love that. Of all the people as well, that casting perfect, absolutely perfect.
I also think it's good to give people a range of exercise choices, because people are going to be attracted
Yeah,
to
exactly.
different things. And maybe morning yoga as much as I might personally enjoy that, maybe not for everybody.
No, I'd even do that, by the way. I'd give you an option. So like obviously the yoga, I'd give that if you're more of a chill guy. If you're Alfari, maybe you want to do like fucking boxing or something, man. Maybe you want to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Why not? There could be something that you can do as well. Yeah.
I'm a person of extremes. So while I enjoy yoga for the contemplative stretching experience and the way that it makes my body feel very good afterwards, my other extreme is just doing like 3 or 4 days of Muay Thai a week, right? And I don't really do anything in between those two extremes.
Here's the thing, though. I'll tell you what, young men who are watching this show right now, if you think yoga's some like pussy shit, spoiler, if you go in your first classes, you will be humiliated by old women. They will just be going straight into poses. And by the way, they'll be in poses where they're considering that like a rest pose, and you're like struggling, like, bloody hell, I hope we don't have to keep hold of this. And then they're like, oh, ease into it. This is a place of contemplation. Like, you'll be getting wrecked, mate. So it'll humble you real quick, which is good, actually.
Especially because if you do more active forms of yoga, it's actually it could be a quite strenuous workout as well. Like you'll be sweating like a motherfucker, and you will be getting styled on by like.
Absolutely.
It's great. Yeah. It's fun.
It is. I agree.
As an esports viewer, I usually don't have a full-on favorite team, but I currently really enjoy watching Heroic and CS. What are your guys' favorite CSGO and LoL teams to watch as a fan/viewer? Could be current or past teams. I mean, we'll talk about LoL on this show. You can ask the question on by the numbers.
I mean, you've named a couple already. Obviously, for you, like EDG and Gen.G and T1 are up there, right?
I mean, exactly. Those are probably my three favorite teams to watch right now because
stylistically, good macro, basically, right?
Yeah, and T1 has good macro, but they also just pass the eye test like a motherfucker, and like I just appreciate greatness in whatever form it takes, and then. I have my bias towards macro, which is why you would say EDG and Gen.G right now.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, in League, I actually also do enjoy watching teams with good macro. I think it's probably the most consistently pleasant aspect to watch. But the other aspect of League is obviously just like smash mouth League where you just have really powerful players. So that's why I've always been a fan of every team Knight plays on, basically. Because if you play to the win conditions around Knight, you're just going to have some amazing pop-offs. Like, he has some of the best Silas games I've ever seen in my entire life, like unbelievable ones where they just do shit. Like, I think for real, it's not really true. I almost feel like he's the reason they made it so you couldn't buy those 2 stopwatches. Because if you ever saw some of the players he did, like, that would have broken League forever, mate. Like, if someone did that like a game 5, even though it doesn't make like logical sense on some of the build, you would just win the game. You just get you get your most powerful super fed carry, 2 chances to get invulnerable, and like that was OP. I'm glad they actually fixed that, because the LPL bids would have ruined the whole league. And then in CSGO, I mean, he mentioned it there. The obvious one at the moment, if you like tactical counter, is Heroic. Like, they just play a really great team bit. It's like all the great Danish teams. Really great team based CS. It's not about one player. They play through like the captain's calls. They play as a team. But the other obvious team, because they're still good, is obviously FaZe for me. Because what I love about FaZe is they still have like the most entertaining style. Like, even if FaZe lost, they're probably going to be in the game. There's going to be a bunch of clutches. They're going to have like a cool moment where they come back into the game. Like, they're just the team where they track throughout the whole match. Like, they're always an entertaining team to watch. And they match up against everyone because they've got like such a well-rounded squad. They always have a good map pool. So I would say Heroic and FaZe are the 2 for me right now.
Very good. Here's a good one. If you were to create a .A award for overhype, washed, or WTFY import players, who would the award be named after? And is it too early to give it to Pioshik? I think we've had a ton of these players. Obviously, Hachani, very famous. That's more of a WTFY because like he wasn't even good in Korea when he was on KT. I think Piglet would be another one because Piglet was Piglet was clearly washed by the time he came to NA. He had a very terrible 2014 on T1, which was probably T1's worst year of their existence on the whole.
He bounced back later, though.
Sort of.
No, he had like a split on that split where TSM had like the 8, 17 and 108. He actually was pretty decent on Team Liquid. Then he was holding his own with Doublelift at the time when Doublelift was like smurfing on the league. I think.
All right, that's fair. All right, fair.
And also, as you said, there'd be way more egregious ones. So like Piglet doesn't even win this category, guys. Not Piglet for sure.
But I think there's kind of 2 different awards here because like Hachani was like WTFY because everybody kind of knew he was bad. Pioshik was coming off the World Championship and he was okay last year. It's not that Pioshik was terrible all year. It's just that there was nothing really special about Pioshik besides like the occasional Kindred game. And so that's why it felt really strange.
That's
to
also
have
why
him
that
go to
one doesn't
LPL.
work, though, I think, because the problem is he wasn't, like you say, the actual. For this category to work, you actually have to probably have been really good. It's just that then you got hyped that coming to the West would make you awesome. Because to me, it's the logic that everyone always says of like, well, they're going to smurf on LCS. Like, it's like that. It's if you fail to live up to that. So who else could even be on this list, though? There's got to be some Europeans would apply for this, surely. Like,
I
what
don't know. Maybe it was
European
like
players have been whacked?
Froggen's time in NA, perhaps.
Nah, he was still good, though, mate.
He was still pretty good, yeah.
That's the problem. Because who was hyped with them wasn't that good when they came.
Bang, maybe.
The Bang's not a bad one, actually. Yeah, that's a good one, actually, mate, because it was only me that was down on him. Everyone else was like, he was the greatest ADC in Korea. Like, and then he came to LCS, and unironically, he was just average. The joke is, because we say this in English, he was bang average. He was just he wasn't bad, by the way. He certainly wasn't bad, but he was just average, wasn't he? He was just like if you'd have taken the nameplates off, you wouldn't know that was a Korean world champion. You would think it was just an all right player. He wasn't bad. He was just an all right player.
Who is the greatest Band-Aid mid-season pickup of all time? Ooh. I mean, Abadage was pretty good for 100 Thieves.
Yeah, but there's other ones that are going to be like for the Asian regions that are going to be way better than that, though, aren't they?
I mean, LCK very rarely picks up mid-season players.
I mean, I can give you one, though. One,
okay.
I don't know if it was mid-season, might be before that split, but if you remember when, fuck's sake, I've lost his name now. You know, in season 5 summer, that support player that used to be on SKT and then he came over to fucking KT. He was like a Thresh player. He came to NA eventually.
Oh, shit. I know I'm seeing
I'll
his
look
face.
it up. Yeah.
Peekaboo.
Peekaboo. There you go.
Yeah.
It was, by the way, sadly, I think he had RSI issues. That was a good one. That made them like they went to the finals after they got him. And he was a stud, by the way. He also, apparently he had RSI issues and people don't know why he sort of like faded out after that. He should have played way longer, mate. He looked pretty good, didn't he?
He was like fluent in English too, so he would have been like very popular in the West.
That's a good one.
What are your favorite non-esport video games? I've talked about this a lot, guys. I play a lot of narrative RPGs because I like video games as art and video games as literature. What I've been playing recently, like Witcher 3 is one of my all-time favorite games. The new God of Wars, I think, have been very good, especially the first one. The second one was less good than the first one, I have to say. I've talked about narrative gaming before, so Planescape Torment is one of my all-time favorite games. If you like reading, Disco Elysium was very good. I've been playing Outer Wilds recently. I played the new Horizon game, Forbidden West. I thought was pretty good. What Remains of Edith Finch? I thought was very good. I've been waiting. I still haven't played Pentiment yet, which is the game that I really want to play, but I haven't had time.
The problem is, people know this. I don't play single player games, and I haven't for like 20 something years now. So I'll give you a mega old boomer one that I don't even know if you can probably still play it if you buy it from Steam or something. If you want an old school reference, I just don't hear it bigged up enough. I would say the Commandos series, if people remember that game from like the 90s. It was one where the whole point of this game especially was it was super hard. It was really hard. Like it was one where you had to do everything perfectly and but it was one of those ones where I thought the controls it was actually pretty satisfying though. It was like where you had to like do an actual like crack squad with like you had the guy who could swim under with the tank and then the guy who could cut wire. It was really good though. It was like well executed version of that. But I think that's why it wasn't as popular. It was too hard for some people, I think.
Yeah, I also like just tactical games. So, XCOM,
of course.
I've played all of literally every single Total War game. Yeah, those are games that I really like. Why do you think that VCS, PCS teams underperform compared to NA ones when they have access to the solo queue and can scrim other Asian teams? Actually, so do they? Would be my answer.
Right? Okay.
Do they? And then also, I mean, historically, PCS teams have done better than NA teams.
Here's what's wild about that. The key context he didn't add in was, are you ready, Monty? I'll reformulate what he said. So I answer his question using his question. Monty, why is it that in the era when the best talent historically and at the time in the LCS/PCS region don't play in the LMS PCS region and instead play in the LPL, why is the PCS not doing as well as it used to historically?
Yep.
I think I've solved that answer for you. Guys, you remember earlier when I was talking about Weibo with Karsa? He's actually one of the legends of the LMS. You know Maple on TSM? He's one of the legends of the LCS. You know 4-4 on EDG? He's a legend of the LCS. Like, guys, they don't fucking play in the region anymore. Even old-ass Sword Art doesn't play there. Because the problem is, you're right, in the era when they all were stuck in LMS, but then had access to Scrim, LPL, and all had the relationship with EDG, and you could sometimes Scrim or play Korean. So, yeah, that was when the region was cracked.
Also,
I'm with
Maple.
you, back then, they were like shitting. I've always said this. They were shitting on what LCS did. Like, I said this years and years ago, Monty, something like 4 years ago, but it's aged like a motherfucker. I said, go back years and years ago and explain to me, why is Bjergsen better than Maple? Have you ever seen what Maple's done internationally? Maple's capped like Faker and fucking Rocks Tigers and shit like half a dozen times. Half a dozen. It's better. Like, I know he's not that amazing now. Spoiler, he's still better than Bjergsen now in season 13. Yes. Like, bro,
one of the better mid laners in LCS. He's still
so
good.
basically, we refute your slander of the fucking PCS.
Also, VCS has had some issues where, especially because of COVID, the last couple of years, they often haven't been able to attend international events. And the ping from Southeast Asia to Korea is not insignificant. That's pretty big distance from Vietnam to the Korean server.
What people don't think about is this, Monty. Yes, it's better practice, but if the guy in Korea is on 7 ping and you're on 70,
and you're on 100,
it's not that much better, if you know what I mean. Like, you're just getting your ass handed to you all day long. Like, that's why, by the way, it's true though. If you want to go the other way, the rare times there are stories though of like some player from VCS or fucking PCS getting high in Korean solo queue, that's why they get like a lot of like behind the scenes hype though, because people know they're playing on those pings. Like, that's mad impressive if you can get like top 10 Korean challenger with like a fucking account from Taiwan or something. That's mega impressive.
Well, here's a question that we should have read earlier. Which player do you think retired too early and you wish you could have seen a few extra years of? Peekaboo? Peekaboo is a great one. Yeah. So he literally asks about Peekaboo.
Right,
yeah,
Peekaboo.
I would agree with Peekaboo.
One.
Yeah, he literally asked about Peekaboo.
Let me think. Who else? I mean, an obvious one for me, bearing in mind, now we know what longevity is possible. I've got to say my boy Wejar, if people don't know, he was still good at the end when he was on that dodgy WE in 2014. Like, if he could have played 10 years, that's one of those players who would seem to have the mindset and skills where they could have just re-upped their game every year, I think.
I mean, Smeb is another one.
There's another
I feel like Smeb
classic,
really didn't have to retire when he retired. No. Let's see here. If you could time teleport any currently retired player.
The obvious one for LEC is Expected. Come on. He could have played He could be playing now if he wanted to.
Yeah. If you could time teleport any currently retired player from any time in their career onto a team right now, which player/team would you choose? I mean, I would bring Smeb back again. I think that would be a pretty,
and put him onto Dam1.
Yeah, prime Smeb onto Dam1 would be pretty lit.
That would be fucking sick. Imagine that lineup.
That'd be a pretty fun one. I like that. I mean, I would even take Prime Nuggery and put it back on top one right now. Why not? Just give them a prime top laner. That's really what they've been lacking.
Oh, mate, the real what if in the Dam1 dynasty is if they did just kept those 3 players, which are the obvious ones together, Nagori, Canyon, and Showmaker, just all play together for like 7 years. I'd love to run that experiment, guys. That really could have been like the dynasty to end all dynasties, because if you hear the stories about Nagori, it sounds like he's one of the players who did get broken by being an LPL, mate. Yep. He just couldn't handle it. So I don't even think that it was like he was a flash in the pan. It sounds like he just made the wrong career decision, unfortunately.
This is kind of a silly question, but actually is funny given the history of Summoning Insight. How did you two come up with the idea of making a talk show? This is actually a funny story. It's because Travis Gafford sucks, is the short answer. So what happened was Thorin was invited onto a show that Travis Gafford used to do called State of the League.
No, it was Whose League Is It Anyway? State of the League was with the pro players. This was with the industry figures. It was like,
which is Whose League Is It Anyway? Sorry, my bad, Thorin. And he completely just shit all over Travis and called out Travis on all of Travis's milk toast
as I want to do.
and then I saw it, and because Thorin at the time was more of a behind the camera guy. Like in his interviews, he asked really good questions, but he literally was not on camera. So it was one of the first times that he was trying to really put himself out there and like develop this.
If people don't know, I'd only even done one event in CSGO's analysis at this point. I was not an on-camera person. I didn't have this persona at all.
Yeah, he was a
that
writer.
Was sort of the pilot of my persona, even
exactly.
League, like just showing people, I get spicy too.
I was an admirer of Thorin's content, and I consumed a lot of the early Grilled interviews, and especially because Thorin also did work on StarCraft, which I was very familiar with. So I was watching a bunch of his early League and StarCraft content. So I was an admirer of his work. So when he did that, I basically contacted. We started talking to each other, and I was like, "Why don't we make our own show with blackjack and hookers, and just be much more honest and out there?" And that's how Summoning Insight was made.
And here's the crazy detail, because in many ways, Monty, it actually does perfectly close the narrative loop. Because as you said, we began the episode complaining about Travis, like sort of not addressing big topics and doing it in a bullshit milquetoast way where you don't get into the real meat and potatoes, which he still does. But even better, in similar fashion, he'll just veto stuff from his show, guys, and it's just not even allowed to be discussed. Well, the joke of all jokes is you wouldn't even be able to see the video Monty's talking about because he deleted the episode because people laughed at the fact that I roasted everyone. But luckily, I told a guy who was just a community editor, like, you should check out this episode, mate. And he made like a highlight. It was called Network Kitten. He made a highlight video, which thankfully he caught before Travis took the VOD down. So the highlight video of me roasting him all does exist still. That's still on YouTube. So you can't express that, Travis. Well, I mean, here's the joke of all jokes as well. I don't even actually know if you could even do a copyright strike if you took the video down yourself, because you didn't make any money off it. I know, so I think he might have even actually checkmated himself on that one.
Yeah, Network Kit was great too. I miss Network
Kit. Fun videos,
fun videos for sure. But yeah, that's how it came about, and it was because I got all worked up watching how great Thorin was on this show, and also how garbage the content that was being put out was, and that's how Summoning Insight was made.
By the way, if people don't know, the whole reason why I actually even initially took that style, because if people don't know, I'd done it already a little bit in like StarCraft 2, obviously in League of Legends, on the angle of going on, theirs was called State of the Game. State of the Game, well, it wasn't that one, it was the one unfiltered, obviously, by Chanman, etc. Because I'd been on those shows, the reason I did it like that in League was my perspective. I used to watch those shows like everyone did in the industry. But everyone used to watch Live on 3 and State of the Game and StarCraft 2. But when you would watch those shows, they had so much performative elements to them where there were pro players where if you're in the industry, like, he doesn't like that guy. He's just saying it to be nice, or, oh, yes, congrats. And it's all fixed. So I remember saying, if I ever get invited on one of those shows, and you can go watch, sadly, I probably went too far, on Unfiltered, I just said, if I ever go on these shows, I'll just tell them how it is. I'm just going to be the guy who, spoiler, you can go back and look. I'm the guy who went on State of the Game and just told Total Biscuit to his face. I think most of you commentators are actually crap in StarCraft. You just sell a false bill of goods and do stuff like say that they have to hold the base when they have like 30 units left against a 200 supply army. And mate, none of these people were prepared for that. Because as I say, they all lived in this safe world where it's sort of like quid pro quo and let's not talk about the elephant in the room. And I just barged in there like, right, motherfuckers, like, it's beautiful. It's kind of like what I've done in the esports industry in general.
And also, as in true MonteCristo fashion, my greatest motivator in life is just getting angry at something that exists. And that is the genesis of almost all of my creativity. I'm not a person who's like, you know what? This thing doesn't exist, so I'm going to go build it in isolation. It is like, this thing exists. I hate it, so I'm going to build the opposite of this thing. That's how I work. I mean, if you look at my career, it's like, I hate Riot, so I'm going to build Overwatch League. I hate the way that CSGO operates, so I'm going to build Flashpoint. I hate the way that all of these shows exist and that we have this media industry that's controlled by developers. I'm going to build Last Free Nation. I exist in opposition to established things, and so it makes sense that is how this started. But anyway. Monte, you mentioned on previous SIs you'd like to see a Super League. How would Monte's ideal Super League operate? 20 teams that are selected. Everybody moves to Korea or China. Probably, or you can live in either place because it doesn't really matter in terms of ping if you play in either location. So then everybody just lives there, and we get to 20 team Super League, and it's a total banger. That's how it works. I wouldn't even mind round robin in that situation. And there are no more import restrictions, so teams can hire whoever they want. And by the way, guys, we would definitely see all Western rosters within the Super League. We definitely.
By the way, would the premise for this league be though, like, is this an ideal world where this is all that exists in league now, or would you have like, is this just like part of the year's the Super League and then the rest of the year are domestic leagues? Would you balance it out in the circuit?
Nah, fuck it, man. I only want to see the top competition.
Okay.
So the domestic leagues would operate like the ERLs underneath.
So basically, LCS is the Shadow Realm that everyone who isn't FlyQuest is banished to.
I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't bother me. I mean, the LCS is already the Shadow Realm, so why not just make it official, would be my argument. And we definitely would see like all European rosters. And those European rosters, I think, if they were given the opportunity to regularly compete against Chinese and Korean teams, would be good. There are definitely world-class players in Europe.
Yes.
Their practice environment is just garbage. So you fix their practice environment, I think they start to do really well. We saw this in Overwatch League, guys. We saw it. Yep. Before Overwatch League, except for Team Envy, the Korean players were dominating. When Overwatch League started and all the pro players went to NA, it balanced out real fast. And we actually saw mixed Korean and Western rosters eventually winning titles. So we do know that if you actually get all the good players in the world into one location, they can be competitive with each other.
To me, the part that people miss, the most obvious principle that is missed in this sense is it's not that the Western player will be as good as the top Korean player or good at that team, but just familiarity with playing them is so much of the battle. Like if you've played that guy 50 times, it's so different to having played him 5 times, you know? When you played him 50, even if he beats you, you're not scared that he's going to beat you. You've played him a million times. Like, you know the ins and outs of the match. You just, at that point, you play your odds, you see if you get the upset, you know? Half the time at Worlds, like, that's why those stories suck. That because of the World's format, by the time people reach the playoffs, they've already lost 1 million scrims to all the Asian teams. They're not getting scrims against the best ones anyway. There's an internal scrim culture they're not a part of, and then they just lose the best of 5. Like, that's why it sucks, because the player goes in. Like, remember that story I told where the season 9 G2, the team were all hailing as the greatest ever. Even they came in thinking, well, we shouldn't beat any of these playoff teams. They're all better than us. Like, guys, that is what kills the Western game. If you just, like, it's why you have all those upsets within the domestic regions. Like, people like Hanwha Life should never have any universe where they can beat T1. But if you're just playing the same scrim culture and you play enough matches, it's going to happen eventually.
Yeah. I also just think that it's too hard to follow League of Legends right now. Even people whose full-time jobs are like co-streaming all these regions, being casters, or me, whose full-time job is now content creation within League of Legends, as well as operating the business of LFN. It's really tough to watch all of these games. That's why I had to do bangers only and just start to ignore all of the bad games, because that's the only way you can actually produce a legitimate power ranking of the top 10 teams in the world, right? So it's really tough. And I just want a Super League so we can actually watch all of the good teams in one place and have a conversation about the best teams in the world. It's all just split up right now. I know this is less an opinion, more of an actual journalism question, but on IG, whenever I watch Gideon, he's always talking on the comms. Is he talking in Korean or Chinese? How is the communication? I don't know, man. I don't know how the communication is working.
I'm afraid.
That's a dumb question. If Rookie does a Grand Slam with Top this year, how close is he to eclipsing Faker? That would get him pretty close, I think. I mean, if he can win MSI and Worlds in both domestic playoffs, that he's already in the conversation with Faker, guys.
Yeah, the main problem Rookie has is just that the reason why everyone feels so confident saying like Faker is, let's be real, at this point, some people just say the GOAT of esports, they even put him Fast Flash, etc. because how many years he's done. I think LS maybe even made that argument. Like, in the modern day, the reason why people think it's a slam dunk that Faker's the best is because he has the eye test, the longevity, and the accomplishments. It's basically unbeatable, isn't it? Whereas, like, the point in this scenario is, I don't say that, like, Rookie is better in terms of accomplishments. He obviously isn't. In terms of longevity, that's debatable. But my point is, I'm just going purely on, like, body of work. But if you're going to win most people over, you've got to get more accomplishments. His problem is he's just got the Worlds and like some LPL. That's it. He needs to win like an MSI, like especially a modern MSI would be way more valuable, win another Worlds. For a lot of people, that's going to be a major limiting factor to the discussion if you don't have those titles, because Faker has everything.
It's also, it depends on the game, right? And it's hard to have an argument about a player being the greatest of all time when there's only 5 players on a team. So each player has an like a big ability to impact the overall team performance, especially as a mid laner, guys, especially as a mid laner. You know, it's not like an NFL roster where there's 53 dudes, right? And obviously the quarterback is enormously important to an NFL roster, but great quarterbacks can be on teams that never do anything, like Dan Marino on the Dolphins, right? So I think it's harder to do that in League of Legends. And also, by the way, guys, and Rookie, you people will say, oh, Rookie was griefed by his teammates. He has been griefed by his teammates, but part of being a great player, guys, is managing your career. Like Rookie, remember, if Rookie wanted to be considered the greatest of all time, he could have come back to Korea and competed against Faker. Like if Rookie's greatest goal was to eclipse Faker as the GOAT player of League of Legends, what better way to do that than to come back to LCK and literally directly compete against Faker? Because we've almost never seen that. The other problem is that we have not seen that matchup hardly at all.
Yep, that's true.
So I don't think Rookie's main goal, Rookie has not managed his career well in terms of selecting teams with strong teammates that are going to get him to international events, even though his individual performance has been outstanding.
It's why the smartest thing Faker did wasn't any actual action. It was to not leave T1. That actually was the best move, because what it did was, that was the org, especially with someone like Faker, most primed to continually put the right talents around you. And it had the Bjergsen effect, where everyone wants to play for T1 because you're there. Like, those two factors combined, I think, are the secret. If you look in any region, to dominate your region is like, everyone wants to play with you, and you've got the money to buy them. Rookie's problem is he's got all these different teams now.
And you have the prestige of the organization. It's like why you want to play on the Lakers in the NBA. Because they have a consistent history. They have a huge prestige surrounding it. So players want to go there. Rookie players want to be on the team. And superstar players will also go there to expand their legacy. And if you can stay on the Lakers for a long time, the ability of that team to build around you is extremely, extremely good and has been proven over multiple decades. Same is true of T1, guys. Somebody's asking, when will the final reflections interview be for Carlos, if at all? I noticed you don't historically do reflections interviews with owners, at least owners I know of, like Jack. They're typically with players, coaches, and broadcast talent. Do you have any plans to do a final reflections with Carlos, wrapping up his esports career, I guess? Because he doesn't seem to be very interested in doing that anymore.
Here's the thing. I think it will happen. Like, one day we'll probably do another one. It's just, I would say I'd probably leave a while. Like, I'd like there to be more time between all the stupid bullshit people are going on and on about. And basically when we do the interview, so you can just be more like, I'd rather it was more like people were like, oh, cool, I'd actually like to like see what his final thoughts were. I'd rather that was like the reception, rather like, what is he doing back in esports?
Yeah, exactly. People just get mad right now.
At the moment, I don't think there's any point. The real tragedy is this. I'll give you a little bit of juice, which is sadly, actually, believe it or not, I actually had one sort of lined up not that long after that fucking incident was going to have happened that I'd already arranged previously. Like, well, let's do it in the off season, like one of those ones. So it actually got sort of fucking scoffed by all the shenanigans, because what would be the point on coming on camera now, you know?
Yep. Last Free Nation is approached to do a game crib style show. Which 5 players would you put together to recreate that masterpiece for I guess it's for maximum drama. They can be from any region, from any era of LoL history, are able to speak with each other fluently. You can set the parameters. However, Reggie must reprise his role from the show.
I mean, it feels like Doublelift has to be there, surely.
Doublelift, Piglet,
Slam Dunk,
Dardoch, Reggie. I mean, if you're going to make it like super toxic, I mean, the hilarious thing would be to put Faker and Reggie together, because Reggie would just try and give Faker a bunch of bullshit, and then it would be just funny because he's doing it to Faker, and Faker would just not respond.
No, because the joke is Faker would just be like, if you like insult like fucking Data in Star Trek, like, that doesn't really compute, John Luke. Why would you say that to me? You know, just like, Reginald, you are being quite antisocial to me right now. That doesn't seem like a fair way to treat the top player. Like, you would, you know, it'd just bounce off him, wouldn't it? Like, Reggie would have met his match that day, mate. Exactly.
So that'd be pretty fun to watch, too.
Obviously, in the team, I'm going to have Lena handling communications and roster decisions. Why not? Why not?
She's the comms officer in the Star Trek analogy.
I'm going to have Nicole LaPointe Jameson taking care of culinary aspects because she's going to make sure the players get the nutrition they need to play those games. You know, I'm going to have a gamer doc there for massages, mainly to massage the ego of Nicole so that she can do the good job of it. Whatever, you get the joint anyway. And then basically what I'll have is the guy who's going to actually, let me see what angle would I go with here. Basically, I'd also, for no reason, just have Captain Flowers in the corner watching everything. So just at the end of the split, he could just go, whatever went on in that game crib's house was disgraceful. And I, for one, think it's not good that you do things. Can I please have all my social media club? Please, please, please. So whatever. That's just it, yeah.
If you had to wear a costume, Halloween or April Fool's prank of anyone in esports or of a league champion, who would it be? Money being no object for this costume. I think there's probably like a fire Richard Lewis Hell in the Cell champion costume with like a big ass title belt that nobody's done yet. That could be pretty funny.
I mean, I would just do something like I'd just be Dr. Disrespect or whatever. That would be pretty funny, wouldn't it? Who would want to watch that? That'd be fire.
Doesn't Riot have a monopsony over the market for casters rather than a monopoly? Monopoly being the only seller in town, monopsony the only buyer around like a mining company and like a coal mining company in a small isolated town, I guess. I mean, sure, whatever. They control the market. That's the point. Is it fair to say Richard Lewis is arguably the most important person in the esports space? Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument in terms of accountability, for sure, and investigative journalism, because everyone else has bounced. Like, who else is doing it? Like, I guess George Geddes is doing a pretty good job in the Valorant scene, but in terms of bad actors and business journalism, like he's the best.
I mean, remember,
imagine breaking the Danny story and the CS:GO 2 story in the same week. Holy shit.
I mean, here's an imagine for you, Monty. Imagine a world where I did my video on Danny and then that was it. Nothing else ever came out. Well, you already saw the response. When Danny made his tweets, they're all pretending it never happened now, Monty. Loads of people were going, wow, maybe Thorin made it all up. Like, that would have been the response if Richard Lewis didn't come right behind me with like a super fact-checked article that had been through legal and everything. Like, that actually basically was necessary to even get my story over to the public, as it were, you know.
Well, I think Richard Lewis's article too, like it's not that you had bad sources or were giving misinformation, far from it. But I do think that having an official publication put it out where, you know, an editor has like worked with Richard in order to make sure that everything is absolutely airtight. Again, I know you do this, but it's a difference in perception based on a personal YouTube channel versus an official publication. How many dislikes does Thorin's Nemesis video have? Do you know? Is that one of your more disliked videos?
Basically, the problem is, because I think they watched it on LS's stream, it had fucking a lot. Like, I'll look it up now. The problem is that, didn't they hide dislikes, though? Is that still a thing? Let me put in.
I think maybe that's why he's asking, because he wants to know.
Oh, right. Maybe I can check behind the scenes. I'll have a look if I can actually check, if there's a way for me to see. Let me see, because I'll have to go and like check. It's from like a year ago. I'll be able to search on YouTube. It'll be an interesting answer, because by the way, it's going to be it'll be like thousands and thousands, Monty. Like, this is how pathetic those fans are. They just went and en masse downvoted the video. Let me just have a look. How do you check the number of?
I don't know, man.
Does anyone? I'm in the
creator
now,
studio,
but I'm trying to find
out. That's what Andrew, our producer, is saying.
Wait there.
Hey, look. In the meantime, while he's looking,
it's lagging. Yeah, keep going. I'll come back to that.
This question is literally phrased in the most offensive way possible. Do you love to see it? Do you think if Perks got the spot in 2021 G2, he could have done the colonoscopy on Reckless and got the stick out of his arse, and the roster would have worked instead of not making Worlds?
Here's the problem. In a way, part of me does think that Perks is one of the few people who would sort of get Reckless in line, but I also think personally that there's a world where like it would have gone the other way, and then Perks would even have just publicly said like, yeah, you were right, Thorin, basically, because spoiler, that's what the G2 people did. Like, they also thought maybe you're not right, and then they got me, and that's why, like, if people haven't guessed yet, still G2, just as a personal favor to me, let me be the one to break that Reckless was getting kicked, because they were essentially like, you were right all along, we should have listened to you, so fuck it, you can do it. That's why also, by the way, when that Wulu guy came out like, I can corroborate that Thorin's correct, his report, no, you can't, motherfucker, you can't. You might think you can, but I know you can't. So whoever you got it from didn't know themselves. So sit the fuck down. So I would say like that. I could see that going either way. Flip a coin on that one. Maybe it works because let's be real. If you get him in line, Reckons is a fucking really good player. But I also don't know because here's the thing. I could see someone like Perks getting mad tilted by that guy's like attitude and practice and mentality. Like I could see some of that rubbing him the wrong way because Perks is the guy who's just gonna address you bluntly. He's not gonna pussyfoot around and dance around you. So that either would really work on Records to sort of wake him up, or it could make it a nightmare. Could be like the biggest blow up of all time.
Based on Riot's reaction to the Danny situation, it seems like they haven't changed their policy of not acting on an issue unless compelled by law to do so. I'm not sure they're going to be compelled by law to do anything here, just to be clear. This being the case, is there anything the community or industry figures can do to prevent things like this from happening again? Yeah, you can actually just go and fight on behalf of the people who you know are vetting the sources and telling the truth. Yes, like you can make a big deal out of it on social media. Sponsors really care about that, turns out. Like the more fire you can create, the bigger chance of something actually happening is. So, you know, by all means, go to Reddit, go to Twitter, like tell Riot you're pissed. Talk about EG, like bring attention to the situation. You absolutely can help.
I found the answer, by the way, if we loop it back, which is the Nemesis video got 2,500 dislikes. So it was at like 50%. It was like 2,700 or something. Like that's how absurd. If people don't know, the average for most YouTube is like 90% plus something. Like almost everyone uploads. Like that's mental that was on like a 52% upvote rate or something. Like there you go.
What is your favorite champion ability? I think it's hard to divorce one ability from the entire kit of a champion, but I think I like Azir ult a lot. Obviously, it's hard to take that away from the rest of the kit because it's an ability that can be used very impressively mechanically, can be used defensively, can be used offensively. And here's a hot take that you guys may not like. I like Gwen's Hallowed Mist because I like abilities that have very defined timing windows that pro teams can play around. Gnarlt would be another one that I really like. Because it is very expressive in terms of individual skill as well as team coordination skill to play around these abilities.
The obvious one for me, just because I think it did just open a new dimension to League, it's got to be Silas R.
There you go. Yep.
Because I think the joke with that is we still haven't even seen all that's possible with that. I mean, the cool thing about the Silas and the Viego abilities is like, it's the potential for like players that people didn't even think of for years with those champions. Like there's so many interactions you can do. Like we were talking about during Worlds, right? The whole shit with where like the fucking, what was the thing with Viego during Worlds that people found? Do you remember what I'm talking about? Where it was like, if he dies as a certain champion, it activates the does it, like if he dies as Zillion as a Viego, doesn't it activate the passive? So you know what I mean? What was it? There was some interaction like that someone found. Do you remember what I mean?
Oh, it was the Anivia. It was the Anivia.
There you go, made the egg. That was it. So first of all, I just find that
I didn't even know. Yeah. I was very surprised to see that.
It just shows you there's like a level to the game you don't know. And then crucially for me with the Silas one, the reason I've always thought that was so cool is because when it works really well, you just get to see a hypercharged version of the other person's ult because it's a super fed Silas with their ult. So some of them are amazing that they can pull off when they get fed like that.
Both Viego and Silas give a lot of skill expression too, because you actually have to be able to play the champions they turn into. Especially Viego. So
like when people cry about those champions being OP, it's like more like the players OP, mate. Come on.
I'm looking into buying a smoker at the moment. Are there any brands or particular models you can recommend? Well, if depends on how you're smoking. Freeze pipe, we recommend that.
There you go.
Gotta throw that one in. Sorry.
Right.
But for smoking food, so it depends on your budget and how you want to do things. If Big Green Egg is very popular, if you want to go for the actual burning route, I have a pretty like inexpensive Charbroil electric smoker because I didn't know how much I was going to be using it when I got it.
How long does it take to smoke roughly?
It depends on what you're smoking.
Like if you're doing some ribs, how long would that take to do? Like
5 hours for ribs, maybe. Okay. But it could be 10 or 12 hours for brisket. Could be longer for pork shoulder. It just depends on what you're doing. And that doesn't change regardless, really, of what smoker you have. Obviously, Traeger. So for me, if I were to, I'll tell you what I would do if I were to upgrade my smoker. I would probably either get a Traeger. I would get a pellet smoker because they're easier to handle, and you just buy the bags of pellets, and they feed in automatically with an auger to control the amount of smoke very effectively, and can be controlled like via Wi-Fi and apps, which is fun. So I either buy a Traeger, but I I've heard very good things about the new version of the Weber grill smokers. So I have a Weber propane grill, and Weber, apparently the first generation of their smokers, which is designed to compete with the high-end Traegers, had a lot of design flaws, but the new version is apparently really, really good and is actually better for grilling than the Traeger is, while offering a comparable smoking experience. So based on what I've read and know about, that's what I would recommend. But I don't know. I would have to do more research myself. I've just heard the newer Weber was better, but Traeger is still like the gold standard of pellet smokers. I also don't need the smoker to grill necessarily, so the smoking performance is more important because I already own a Weber propane grill. So it depends on what you want. How to tell the difference between childish and serious/mature writing? I don't know how to answer that. Depth of themes.
No, I mean, there's a few like
of characters.
I think there's a few real, like, I know what he means by that. Like, for example, I would say a very classic example of childish writing, because this is just how children think, is like everything's first person, but like not even in a way where it actually describes the first person experience. It's more like you just in first person say what happened, Monty. So it's like, Bill went to the store. When he was at the store, he saw his enemy, Bob. Bill wondered, like, that's, you're not even doing a good first person job there. I'm not even inside the person's mind. It's just like a shit recounting of the story. So basically, anytime I see like very simplistic writing like that, I always think that's a telltale sign. This writer's just bad. They're just bad at writing, mate.
Apart from the Rogue Razor Cake, what is your favorite cake? I am a pie enthusiast and not necessarily a cake enthusiast, but I like cheesecake, less sweet cakes. I mean, occasionally I can fuck with one of those like chocolate lava cakes or something like that. But I like pie better typically.
What was the original question?
What is, apart from the Rogue Razor Cake, what is your favorite cake? Do you have a favorite cake?
Oh, do they actually mean a real cake? We're not supposed to come up with like another esports related one. Yeah. I'm not really a big cake fan, to be fair.
So, I like Cake the band, but I don't like.
In fact, I've always thought, to me, cake is actually like, it's a bit of a paradox, and here's why. Because like a slice of classic wedding cake with the really thick icing, Monty. So, in England, basically, if you don't know, like Christmas cake's very similar to this. We'll do like, it'll be like a nice like raisin type cake, but then you put that thick icing around it. Here's what doesn't make sense, Monty. You might know where I'm going with this. If you eat that piece of cake, when you're eating the cake part, you're like, this is all right, but the icing's what I'm waiting for. Delicious, the icing. So you think, well, it'd be even better if it was just the icing. But if you only eat the icing, it's not that good. You know how weird that is? Have you noticed that? You'd think the icing's where it's out, but the icing only works like relative to the cake part somehow. There's some like interaction there. Because spoiler, I've told this story on By the Numbers before. When I came to Atlanta and lived there to do E-League, I went to an American supermarket, and what do you know? You're all fucking mental in America. So in the supermarket, you can just buy a ready-made, they've already made it for you, just a bunch of batter, just a bunch of the fucking icing, just a whole box of cake icing with no cake. So I obviously thought, here's the thinking, man. Got that. Ate the whole thing, and all I'll tell you is I had a religious experience in the toilet for about 3 hours, didn't I? So wasn't good. I wouldn't recommend again. Believe it or not, would not recommend again. So turns out you are only supposed to have that much icing, not a whole portion of it.
Are there any plans for LFN to expand to other games outside of CSGO and League? Yeah, obviously. That's why we're trying to get investment right now, is so we can expand quicker. Obviously, I think primarily the games we're interested in are like probably Valorant, Dota, and Call of Duty, CDL, Call of Duty League. Those are kind of the big ones that we're not currently participating in at the moment. Yeah, we would love to. We would love to do that. We just need some investors, which is what we're working on. What historical person would make the best coach in League or CSGO, and why?
I actually have an answer for this, but it'll be interesting because it's going to be from a sport you don't follow. So it'll basically be a chance for me to explain a very interesting premise that I think you'll dig. It's actually a really legendary football/European soccer coach who was called Brian Clough, who actually came from my area, the northeast of England. And he was a guy who had a totally unique way of coaching. And he actually managed with like Nottingham Forest, who isn't even a relevant team now, managed to actually win like the European Cup, which is like the best title in soccer basically with this like club team. And basically, here's what you would find fascinating, Monty, is, you know, I hate like global meta thinking. This is one of the only guys who used a global meta type thinking, but in a genius way in coaching, which is he was a really matter of fact guy. And whereas most teams, right, actually in sports, what you do is you normally coach the personnel, don't you? Like, right, you're this sort of a defender, so I'm going to put this sort of a midfielder with you. Instead, his philosophy was, I teach everyone to play the way I want football played. So what he would do is he had this whole list of things where he would say, like, goalkeeper, your job is kick that fucking ball out, get it away from my goal. Then he would go, defenders, tackle people, and then pass it to a midfielder. Midfielder, give it to the striker who could do something with it. Wingers, get out the way. Like, you'd have this whole thing where every person had like a very simplistic win condition job, as it were, where it's like, if you just do this and everyone does what I say, collectively the team will just function my style, exactly the way I want the formation. And this worked, because what you would do, Monty, is the opposite to most people. Instead of going, right, I've got these players, if one piece didn't work, he would just bring in a piece that could do that. And so one of the classic things he did, which you would love, is he had a guy who was like an attacking midfielder or something, who when he even got this guy, he was mega washed. He was like, I think he was like late 30s or 40 or something. So everyone else wouldn't even get this guy, because he had this vision of how the game's played. He got him because he could just do one thing, which is like, you know, like keep the ball in the center of the field somewhere. And he just kept this guy for like years and years and years to a bunch of these teams he was in. And so this guy had just like such a, I think if he came to league, he would be like the greatest coach ever, mate, because he would come and it would be like, he would actually figure out like, I need this type of a player to play this style, and then that would complete the exodia, as it were. Whereas in league, most people just try to stack players, and then you go, well, shit, what's the matter? And they just figure it out as you go. And as 100 Thieves didn't show us, but, you know, in theory, tried to show us.
I think Phil Jackson has to be in there too, because he's a guy who knew just how much leash to give pro players. He was very good at enabling strong strategic people within his organization and empowering assistants who had a strong sense of strategy. And he somehow was able to bring all these very disparate personalities together. So I don't even think he has to know much about the games he's coaching. Not to say he doesn't know about basketball, but like he had such insane other skills.
Yes.
And like was the pro whisperer.
Oh, mate, imagine giving this guy people like The Shy. That would be the dream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has been the highlight and low light of your careers thus far? I don't really look at my career in terms of lowlights, because I feel like the decisions I've made were logical at the time that I was making them, and that I've learned a lot. And I think the thing about my career is that I'm always striving to learn more. Like I didn't want, once I reached the peak of casting, my main goal was, how can I try and learn how to do other aspects of the esports business, or be in, more positions where I'm learning about how to sell sponsorships and manage things behind the scenes, and work on my business acumen and learn about the world of raising money and everything like that. So for me, I constantly strive to do different things to keep myself intellectually engaged and growing. So even though obviously Flashpoint was not successful, I think what we did in Flashpoint, creating the product, was highly successful. And I feel really good about that. Like Overwatch League gave me a chance to really learn how to build out a league infrastructure and consult on all of that, and be a core part of many of the inner decision-making circles, which I never got to be a part of at Riot. And that was frustrating to me. So I think my career, and now with Last Free Nation, building up the business itself and learning all about that, and working with our CEO, who's very well, he's very knowledgeable about the podcasting space and learning about this whole other industry. I just don't feel like I've had that many career lowlights. Like I constantly felt like I've grown.
The problem with this question is, I don't think the person asking it, being as there's someone who obviously subscribed to Discord as a fan of the show, I don't think they're trying to trap us and be mean. I think it's a genuine. I think it's a good faith question where they just want to know what would we consider like the good and the bad moments. The problem is this: one, because of how fucked the esports industry is, if we just don't say all the things that people want to claim against us, that will now be the whole topic. So unfortunately, it inadvertently became a trap question. Because I'll just phrase it like this: I saw Richard make this comment the other day. It was in his Substack. If people go, Richard Lewis has launched a Substack, and in it he he did an article explaining why he did a Substack. And I thought a point he made there really hit home with me, mate, which is that like every time Richard Lewis publishes an article, half the comments are people who are like, there's all lies. And the other half is, as he said, a referendum on who he is as a human being from nobody idiots on the internet. So I'm just beyond, you know what, Monty, I agree. It'd be good if we could just list ourselves flaws, you know, regrets we have. But why should we in an industry where every time we do something unarguably good, people act like every single thing we ever said or did wrong was the most heinous shit, and every single thread of that has to be another referendum of, this is why you're a piece of shit. Like, it's just boring. Like, at this point in time, there's already been an absurdly disproportionate and inappropriate amount of coverage of the supposed sins of MonteCristo, Thorin, and Richard Lewis. I'll just say this sentence right now. If you understand this sentence, everyone who wants to say there's a knock on me can go and fuck themselves. I have never committed a crime in 22 years of working in the esports industry, nor have I ever told a single lie. None of you can say that. There's not a single critic of man can make that claim, Monty. So all sit the fuck down. You are not even in a position to morally judge my life. So I've made plenty of fucking comments about regrets I have and things that were bad. So I'll give you a positive story, just because people who work from League won't know this one. One of the cool moments in my career, there've not been that many markers that I look at like, oh, what a cool, but it's ones that are unexpected. So I thought a really cool one is, if people know the really great French Counter-Strike player, Kenny S. This is a guy who I was just a fan of him as a brilliant player. He was like a prodigy for many years. And he was in that circle where, look, I know a little bit of French from school, but I would never go and try and speak to the French players. They were very standoffish for a few years. But then crucially what happened was he got a Norwegian girlfriend. And so suddenly, instead of there just being like NBK that would talk to all those Westerners, suddenly Kenny S would talk to us because obviously his girlfriend from Norway doesn't speak French. So he had to get comfortable speaking English. So then I actually was able to become even quite good friends with him. And there was a moment where he won the major, the first time and the only time in his career he won the CSGO major, was DreamHack Cluj-Napoca in about like November of 2015. And the cool thing was this: after he won the major, he hugged his girlfriend, sought me out, and I was the next person he came and like hugged or whatever. Because behind the scenes, we just had a really cool friendship where I was always encouraging him and trying to like tell him like go through the hard times and don't let this like setback. Like, for example, if people don't know, the previous major he'd like failed in the final of that and done pretty badly and was crying. So it was just a really beautiful moment because it's so rare, you know this. Even if you're friends with players, unfortunately, there is a high school element of esports where they're supposed to publicly pretend they're not friends with us because we're not as cool as the players. So when a player just like breaks that wall and is actually just like, yeah, like, thanks for helping me, that's very unexpected, but it's a really nice feeling, I'll tell you that. And he's one of the all-time great players.
There you go. How would you rate Insight on Esports versus Last Free Nation so far? Has the channel grown, and how's the process of the creating the company job satisfaction versus your casting analyst days? Well, job satisfaction is very good because we get to build something that we own and work with colleagues that we like and appreciate, and we get to build it with them, and they also own it, and we can actually just talk about whatever we want because we're free from developer or tournament organizer influence. Like, it's good. Like, that part's great. This is the dream, guys. And also, people come watch our content because we're here. It's not like, oh, I'm going to watch Korean League of Legends because Faker is playing. No, you come here because you like us too and the rest of the talent that's involved, and you want to support us, and that means a lot. So for me, this is like the end game of esports, getting big enough where now we have our own audience pool. As I've talked about before, it's the same shit. Like, the reason why Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith get paid so much money isn't because those shows are watched more than NFL games. They're not. It's because they are the draw, right? And people watch because it's Stephen A. Smith and because it's Skip Bayless and because it's Shannon Sharp, right? Sports punditry is the dream because the margins are also better. It's very expensive to produce an NFL game. It's not very expensive to produce studio sports punditry shows, right? Inside the NBA, another great example. Like, that show's immense fun because of the personalities that are there. And those guys get paid more than most sports commentators, or potentially all sports commentators, because of that reason. So that's really the dream job, guys. And so we're trying to create the dream job, and we're trying to help other people be part of that dream as well. We want to be an end game career move where you establish your brand and then you get to own something with a bunch of other people who have done the same thing and get that value, right? So it's really, really good. The channel has grown immensely. We had our biggest month ever on the League of Legends YouTube in February of this year after all of our shows were online. We have a really good content flywheel going with our YouTube shorts and TikToks and everything like that, because finally we're distributing the stuff properly because we've had the resources to hire, people to do that. We have great people like our producer slash everything guy, Andrew, who many of you guys know, who mods our channels as well. He does everything. He's great. We have a Danny in this editor who's wonderful to work with, and we have all the other talent. Now, the process of creating this company is very difficult because the unfortunate reality is venture capital has been difficult to get because of the current economic situation. So have advertisers right now, because people are kind of holding on to their money while they see what happens to the economy. But we have had success speaking to investors, and we are in the process of closing an investment round. And people, especially in the industry, and we'll just say this vaguely, there has been a lot of interest from people within the esports industry, OG people, in contributing, using the money that they have gotten from being successful in esports to pitch in to help fund and partially own this company, because they really believe in it. And they really believe that this is important, that the industry has an independent voice. So that has also been extremely refreshing, I will say. So
but
it's
remember,
not just
the key detail to remember, if you remember that Four Horsemen episode with Mick Artisani last year, the original plan of the company, why we launched at that time, was we were going to get the investment. It's just unfortunately a day before we were going to get them, they signed with Saudi Arabia, the country. So that was our whole game plan initially, to fund the company. So we had a bit of a circuitous route, but luckily we're almost there. We're almost there, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I will say, like, the timing for raising money and getting advertisers on board hasn't been great. But the upside is, even in this kind of garbage economic moment, people are interested because the underlying business principles, the people we have on board and our place within the industry, are seen as very, very good. So if we can get investment now and like ride this out, we'll be in a good place. So I think that has been the hardest part, but hopefully that will be the biggest challenge we will have to building up this company, because I think in the long term, it's very bright.
I also think people don't know how utterly shit monetization has always been for content on YouTube. Like, when people would say that stupid ass line that they always say to downplay me, Monty, well, they go, but it's his job. You wouldn't do this as a job if you had my earning potential in other areas. Like, you are aware, I'm a fool to even create YouTube content in the era when I did events. I would have been better off saying yes to another event and doing zero YouTube content. Yeah, the YouTube content built my brand. The actual monetization was a disgrace. And you know how it was back in the day. Like, dude, in 2017, it's not a joke, I used to just book like 3 massive pieces of content per day. I would do a reflection interview in the 2 talk shows. Then I'd do a Thorin's Thoughts video solo. And then the next day I'd get up and do it again. So I put in like a solid, like, we're talking the better part of a decade grinding this type of content, when really it was more like for my own benefit, to do interviews, get connection, but it wasn't directly profiting. We're now in a position where we're this close to the actual shows, literally these shows, like Someone in Insight, by the numbers, actually being in a position where this will be my full-time job. That's fucking awesome. That's really satisfying feeling.
And honestly, what's been one of the weirder aspects of this is that we've always had a very large and very dedicated audience on our content. But the problem is the market viewed us as YouTube content instead of podcast content. And podcasts advertising pay way better than YouTube sponsorships. And even though our content behaved like podcasts, so for example, I'll just let you guys know this because I don't know, there's not really a downside. On the League of Legends Last Free Nation channel, the average view time is 35 minutes on YouTube. That is unheard of. I have never heard of another channel that has anything close to that average. For reference,
if I had to guess, for another channel, it would be like 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I think the YouTube average is 3 minutes. So every single view you see on our shows on YouTube is 35 minutes of watch time. Okay. So basically you look at our total views for the month and you divide it in half, and that's the number of viewed hours. It is crazy. So our content really performs like podcast content. But the thing is, people didn't view YouTube podcasts with video as being podcasts up until people like Joe Rogan started doing very well with that content. Now the market is changing. Now we have Spotify and Apple Podcasts moving into video content and integrating that into our platforms. So the hilarious thing is, we were like 7 years ahead of the curve, but nobody in the market. And so now, especially with Peter, our CEO, who comes from the podcasting world, we are able to access podcast advertising and podcast budgets. And that is much more lucrative than YouTube because the audience is, the audience behaves differently in podcasts, right?
I'll
And
even
so
throw
now
this in there as well, by the way. Another angle to me that I think's mad is you can't judge us all like we're equal. As in, if you watch like the numbers on The Dive, guys, do you know what platform pushes The Dive? All of Riot Games shit. Like, if they want, they can put it in the client. It's on LOL Esports. All the people on the show, hundreds of thousands of viewers.
The multi-million followers on the LCS YouTube channel.
So the joke is this: if we're even vaguely close to The Dive, we're just better than The Dive, and we actually proportionally perform significantly better. So all I'll say is this: another satisfying thing would be this: I had to carve out my niche in the past. If things go the way that they're looking like they might with our company, we can just scale up. Imagine the world where we have the push like The Dive does. The point is, we'll be dwarfing these guys with numbers. So I think it's the reason it's really satisfying is, like you say, we work on what we want. It's stuff that we already like doing anyway. We're not just doing like for custom, for hire work that we don't enjoy. And actually, the potential future stuff just gets better and better if it works. So I think there's so much skill to this. It could be really cool.
And like I said, February was the first full month where we've been able to actually run our new content flywheel strategy, and we did double the views of any month we did last year, and it was our biggest month ever by a pretty significant margin. So we know that the theory of content is working, and thanks to you guys for all your subscribing and everything like that. So we know this can work. We just need the runway to be able to grow it to its largest potential. And we're not even gonna, we said this before, goal 1 is conquer esports. Goal 2 is move into general gaming. It's moving into nerd culture. We want to have
you
things
guys
like,
want. When you ask a question about like the NFL, imagine if it was just a show. You didn't have to ask every week. You tune in.
An NFL show.
You just watch an NFL show. You watch a graphic novel show. You watch a show about what the current TV shows are like. I'm sure that's actually a dream for a lot of long-time followers. It's good, and hopefully it will be a reality soon. Also, by the way, just as an aside, it's also pretty cool to be sponsored by like a fucking bong that goes in the freezer. Like, let me know how many other people in esports even dare touch that. I could just, joke is, I'll be on one of these videos soon smoking that shit. So get ready for it. I'm saving that because that's going to be the big reveal that people want to see. So I'll save that, but you'll see. It's going to happen. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly, guys. So, it really is, we're working hard to make this work. We want to expand. We don't want to stop at esports. Thorin and I have talked about doing a classic graphic novel book club. Like, all of the talent on LFN also has other interests and wants to do other things. And when we can take people from different games and combine them, we'll pull in all the audiences from those games into general, into general gaming or gaming interests. And honestly, part of the issue with gaming in general is that as we've discussed previously, gaming has the same problems that esports has, which is that everything is controlled by the developers because the big gaming networks are all entirely dependent on the developers for the drip of news. Like, I need to get, I need to get invited to see this new feature or to play test this new game. Or, I need a press release about this announcement that Nintendo is doing or whatever. So they can't actually honestly review games because they need access. And if they give bad reviews, they get blacklisted and then they lose all of the traffic to their websites. So we can do the same thing. We can actually provide honest game reviews because we are not reliant on that same stream of income. So there you go. That's it. That was the last question. Good last question to end on. Thanks, guys, for watching. Best M League show will be on tomorrow.
No, there isn't one. There isn't one tomorrow.
Oh, there's no one this week. Sorry, my bad. Because the LEC
was
off.
No LEC.
So no BDLS this week. That will be back next week.
Yes.
My bad, guys. Otherwise, we'll see you later this week for more content. And thanks as usual for supporting us at Last Free Nation.